Well, welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt, Vice Chair of the Planning Committee. Limited public seating has been made available and the throngs are there this morning, so wonderful. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. The public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts assembled by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everybody use the microphones? And remember to switch them off when they are finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. Please can everyone make sure their mobile phones are not too close to the microphones, as this can cause interference. During the voting, please can members keep their hands raised clearly until the number of votes have been stated. So I kind of count them, and then Mrs. Gill will count them too. Then I've got to indicate the vote either for, against, or abstaining. So what we're going to do now is go around the table, around the room, and introduce ourselves. So I'll start with Democratic Services here on the back left. If you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm James Harris. I'm the Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Very good. Then round to Councillor Mason.
Councillor Hugh Mason, Councillor for St Jude Ward, but not a member of this committee.
Yes, just for the information of the committee before we go any further. So he approached me yesterday, said, could he make some representations on the I think it's second last item, so I agreed. Councillor Fazakerley.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fazakerley, not a member of the committee, but here in representation to make a deputation on item 4, 85 Chichester Road.
Mr. Hill.
My name is Simon Hill and I'm the applicant or agent for 85 Chichester Road, 281 Chichester Road and 275 Laburnum Grove.
Likewise, Mr. Hill, he asked for a late deputation, which I've agreed to.
Hi, I'm Nikki, it's my colleague Laura, both from Coastal Partners.
Good morning, Vicky, good morning. Laura, great job you're doing down there. Over to the rear back. Are you, sir, involved in the meeting? With the white shirt, I beg your pardon. No. Over to our new planning officer. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning all. Greg Chapman, Head of Development Management, started on Monday, so it'll be nice to make your acquaintance in due course.
So please everybody do go up and have a quick chat with him. We're lucky to have him. Great appointment. And to Mrs. Gill.
Good morning, I'm Juliette Gill. I'm the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth City Council.
Simon?
Hello, Simon Turner, Development Management Lead.
Now we'd go down into the murky pit. We'll start with, below me, we'll start with Councillor Ashmore.
Yeah, Dave Ashmore, one of the Fratton councillors.
Good morning, Chair. John Smith, Eastern Craneswater Ward.
Darren?
Well, I'm in your seat, Lee, so I don't know how murky this is. I'm Darren Sanders. I'm one of the councillors for the Baffins Ward.
It can tell many stories. Ray?
Councillor Roman Dent, Copner Ward.
Very good. Councillor Smythe?
Judith Smythe, St Jude Ward.
And Councillor Vallely?
Vallely, lovely, thank you. Councillor Vallely.
I've been practising whilst I've been on holiday, but I will get there one day. All right then, so let's go. So we all have the documents out. There's no smats this morning, which is a bit unusual, but nothing to add. So straight into the agenda, I think. So we've all got our agendas in front of us. I've got apologies here from Councillor Chris Atwell, which I am doing. Councillor Peter Candlish and Councillor Sanders has very kindly agreed to deputise there. Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson and Councillor Ashmore has kindly agreed to deputise there. and Councillor Shah. That's all the apologies I have. So that's the apologies done. Any members, any interests in this meeting? Councillor Sanders and Councillor Ashmore.
2 points to leave. Firstly, I will have to leave this meeting at 12:45 as I have a meeting with Bournemouth, Christchurch, Paul Council. And secondly, I have a conflict of interest in one of the applications that's on the website list of applications, but is not in the confirmed deputations list that we have today, which is Almondbury Road. If it is not up for discussion today, then that doesn't apply.
It's withdrawn.
It does. It's been withdrawn.
I believe so. That's
All right,
correct.
then I only have the one which is I have to leave at 12:45,
All right.
which my apologies, Chair.
Very good. So you'll be fine. Councillor Ashmore.
Well, you've kind of answered my question for me there. I was going to say, Almondbury Road I've had a conflict of interest in, but I didn't think it was being heard today, so I'm glad to hear it's been withdrawn then.
Very good. We'll see what happens later on. Right, I've got the minutes in front of me. I have to propose them, which I've done. Is anybody, presumably people have read through them. Councillor Dent, are you going to second them? Well done, Councillor Dent. So those minutes are agreed, I presume, members? No dissension? No, very good. Right then, that's the minutes done. So into the pack you've got in front of you. And we turn to 85 Chichester Road, and Simon's doing the presentations today, so over to you, Mr. Newell.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 85 Chichester Road for the...
Can I just pause us there, because I've got nothing on my screen. Not that I can see it that well normally. I'm only head of IT, so... Right, okay, there we are. We've got it now. Go ahead, Mr. Newell.
Thank you, Chairman. An application at 85 Chichester Road for the change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to an 8-person house in multiple occupation, otherwise called an HMO. The application has come to the committee at the request of Councillor Fazakerley and due to the number of objections, which are 7 and set out in the report. As you can see from the location plan, it's on the east-west Chichester Road, which runs across the middle of Portsea Island. That one of those long east-west roads. It's towards the western end, and it's situated here in a terrace, mid-terrace, and it has the rear access way for garden and bikes and whatnot down there. The application involves, as is typical with these HMO conversions, in this case, a small amount of demolition of an existing rear structure and then replacement larger structure under permitted development, or in this case, a prior approval extension, forgive me. And then in the roof, some permitted development roof extensions of the large dormer extension to the rear roof. How is the property this summer? Already under some degree of, the works, they're permitted works, so there's no breach of control there. It's the occupation that is sought by planning permission. The two principal themes, but not the only matters, are the community balance in the area and the adequacy of the accommodation proposed. So with respect to the community balance and the policy in the supplementary planning document, we have the 50-metre radius, which considers any other HMOs in the area, known HMOs, and of course we consult neighbours and councillors as well to confirm or challenge our data. In this instance, there is one more known HMO in the area. So with this proposal, if approved, that would bring the percentage up to 2.8%, which is well below the threshold or the indicative limit of 10% in your guidance. So officers would deem there to be no imbalance in the local community resulting from this application, if approved. On to the second principal matter, the adequacy of the accommodation provided. This is currently a C3 family dwelling house with 3 bedrooms upstairs, a smaller box room at the back, and a bathroom at the front, and then a general disposition of living room, second living room, and kitchen to the rear, and so on. Smaller accommodation at the back. The conservatory would be replaced, and this nib there I mentioned will be replaced with the prior approval extension, which you can see there and there. So to take you through the accommodation, we have a bedroom on the ground floor with an ensuite. There's the tank room next to it. A second bedroom with ensuite. Kitchen dining room here, and not so common, but a bedroom at the back of the house and its ensuite. On that point, it has a double door there into the kitchen diner and a means of escape window, which is the issue that sometimes crops up as a question in this meeting. And then on the first floor, 3 more bedrooms, each with an ensuite. Bedroom there with an ensuite at the back, and a bedroom there with an ensuite. And up into the extended roof, 2 more bedrooms with an ensuite each. So just looking at the general disposition of rooms and layouts, to my eye and to the officer's eye, there's nothing unusual or concerning about the layout of the rooms. And then with respect to the sizes, they are all the bedrooms are well in excess of the minimum size, ranging from 10 to all the way up to 17 square metres, so there are some that are very good size. And the communal kitchen dining area is required to be 22.5 as a minimum, given the large bedrooms, and it is 23.46. And then you have all the en-suites as well. So the general disposition and size of the rooms are deemed to be in compliance with policy and otherwise acceptable. So those are the 2 key points. I have mentioned the representations from the neighbours, 7 objections, raising matters like too many HMOs and congestion, parking, crime, rubbish, those sorts of concerns. I dare say Councillor Fasakli will rehearse some of those as well. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you then. Mr. Hill, you've got 6 minutes, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you very much for giving the opportunity to provide this deputation today. My business has converted and operates a significant number of well-managed HMOs within the city, and the sympathetic conversion of HMOs is our primary business. Just to confirm, this property is fully compliant with building regs, and the application number is PF/23/1254. As a business and as individuals, we're extremely passionate about providing high-quality living accommodation for your people of this city. I understand that HMOs are a hugely emotive subject for neighbouring residents, and I sympathise somewhat. People are often concerned about the unknown, and I accept they haven't necessarily previously had experience of our business. All works to this property are being carried out under permitted development. That is to say, they do not actually require planning permission. The only exception to this is the rear extension you've already heard, which has a prior approval extension, which basically means that the works don't require full planning permission. Neighbours had an opportunity to object to it and didn't, and it has therefore got planning permission. Majority of the works are now well underway, and we've taken the advice of the planning officers in submitting this as a C3 to sui generis application. I believe this council and the planning committee should look to encourage the ownership and effective management of compliant and desirable HMOs in areas so that this city can thrive. As you will have heard, the addition of this property would only give rise to a 2.8% count of HMOs within a 50-metre radius, which is obviously significantly less than the 10% maximum allowed. For me, that means that at the moment there's a lack of community balance in the property as it is, in the area as it is, because we don't have suitable accommodation for young people. We hear constantly about the increases in interest rates, and the difficulty that young people have in finding affordable accommodation. That's exactly what my business provides, affordable accommodation for young people. We have a 100% occupancy rate, and we often have a waiting list for our properties because of the standard of accommodation that we provide. And if you're looking for a blueprint of a property that is probably one of the best properties you could convert to an HMO, look no further than this one. Look at the size of the rooms. We're constantly being criticised for rooms that are just over 10 square metres. Some of these rooms are 17 square metres. This is well in excess of the minimum standards that you're looking for. If ever there's an HMO where I feel it should get planning, this has definitely got to be that one. In terms of parking, your local expert, which is Robert Neve for Transport Planning, has said in his letter to the planning officer, Chichester Road is a residential road with bus stops and limited amenities in a close vicinity. No traffic assessment has been provided. However, given the small scale of the development, I am satisfied that the proposal would not have a material impact on the local highway network. So that's the council's expert for planning that you've chosen to consult to get an answer on this, and ultimately that's his response. He, as an expert, doesn't think that it would have a material impact. In terms of issues that often arise or questions that often arise at planning, waste management wise, we have a waste carriers licence, so we're licensed waste carriers, so every single bit of rubbish that is produced from the property during the process of conversion or anything excess other than that can be put in the bins, and we provide additional bin storage to make sure there's ample rubbish storage. But for example, if somebody were moving in and they've got some additional rubbish or whatever, we will get rid of that typically within 24 hours. The company that manages this property, they have ALA registered agents, so Association of Residential Letting Agents. That means that they're experts in managing properties and they specialise specifically in HMO management. You'll notice from the planning officer's recommendation that, although it's quite convoluted because of the way it has to be now, they've recommended for approval of this application. Bike storage will undoubtedly be required as part of this application, and ultimately it's usual for this to be a planning requirement. We're more than happy to put that in place. All of the original clay waste pipe for the removal of waste from the property has been replaced. We replace every single element of plumbing and electrics and waste pipe within the property, so that there can be no issues with regards to the removal of the waste from multiple persons within the property. We have a significant number of these properties and never have we had any examples of any issues where there being any blockages or anything like that. We add rodding eyes into various locations in the house to make sure that if there ever was an issue, we could easily get rid of the waste very quickly. I say that because it's very difficult within 6 minutes to show you how every single element of the conversion of this property is thoroughly planned out so that pretty much everything is thought of. And there will be things that some of you will bring up, but we do really try to take those comments on board. So one of the things we've added in now is we're adding plaques to the front of each property with the details of the letting agency. If there ever were any antisocial behaviour, although we've never had any, we don't anticipate having any, it's very unlikely with the type of tenants we have, etc., that it would be easy to get hold of the letting agent. They have a 24-hour number that can be reached by any neighbours, etc. And often one of the comments from neighbours once we've converted the properties is that actually they do get on really well with our tenants, and they are nice people, and that perhaps they had preconceived ideas of of what the tenants might be like.
Simon,
professionals.
Lovely to hear you and everything, but
We've got 15 seconds left.
15 seconds, good lad. I'm going to ask you to round up.
Thank you very much. I hope you approve this application. Thank you.
Very good. I tend to be a bit stricter on time than some. Councillor Verzakli.
Thank you. I need some clarity, first of all, in so much as that there was a deputation put forward, but I don't see it listed down here, by two residents, Mr. Roger Watling and his wife. They were hoping to come and speak today. They've both been struck down with COVID, so he sent me his deputation to read out. Can I just check, can I read that out as a separate deputation, or do I need to include it within my 6 minutes?
Councillor Verzakli, thank you for raising that for us. I think you're going to have to summarise it within your deputation, because we had this at the last committee and we forbade this because people were bringing deputations to the committee and they were getting more time and introducing more evidence that nobody else had seen before. Hang on, Councillor Saunders. But just to make sure I'm correct, I would go to the legal secretary first of all.
Thank you, Chair. Did they put the deputation in time?
They are listed as one of the objectors. As to what precise time they sent the deputation, I don't know. I've met with Mr. Watling and various other residents. I was expecting him and his wife to be here today until I came in this morning and picked up this email. So I don't know that direct answer to your question, but I certainly can tell you I was expecting them to be here.
Yes, they're not on the list for deputation, so if you could make sure you do it within your 6 minutes.
All right, that's
Okay.
the legal advice. We had this
No,
last time,
fair
Councillor Zachary, and everybody has to be treated the same. Very sorry about that, and to Mr. and Mrs. Watling.
No,
Do you want to
fair
go
enough.
ahead, Councillor Zachary?
Yeah, in which case I'll have to slightly temper mine, but I'll read his letter out in full, their letter out in full. So, addressed to Chairman and committee members, I am unable to attend today's meeting due to testing positive this morning for COVID. If these points from the residents of Beresford Road and Chichester Road could be taken into consideration in relation to the planning application for 85 Chichester Road, we'd all be very grateful. The biggest concern amongst residents about this application is the number of dwellings being proposed. An 8-person dwelling and the building work that is already completed or ongoing set a dangerous precedent for the local area. This is a former 3-bedroomed family terrace house that is in keeping with other properties in the area. At present, 85 Chichester Road has a brick extension added to the ground floor and a dormer that completely spans the width of the building up to the eaves. This has completely changed a 3-bedroom family house into a 3-storey building. The requirement for an 8-dwelling HMO is 2 parking spaces. There are no parking spaces as on-street parking. The consultation mentions there is no need for a traffic assessment as there will be no material impact. The traffic in the area is at best horrendous, to the extent that cars are regularly having to park on double yellow lines as there is absolutely nowhere to park. This makes crossing or pulling out of a side road a very dangerous lottery. Parking will not get any better, and this application will only add to an area that is saturated with vehicles. With the number of HMO proposals being put forward, I would ask that traffic assessments become part of this process. Residents are concerned about the pressure being put on services. In a world where we are regularly asked to conserve water, it seems completely off message that this application will have 8 bathrooms with toilets and showers. In the evening, water pressure in the area significantly drops due to the sheer demand upon it. 8 bathrooms will in no way help this situation. In the past year, we've had raw sewage 4 times across the junction of both Beresford Road and Balfour Road because of the amount of material being put into the sewage system. I am living next door to an HMO and know full well the detriment they bring. Having people, open brackets, quite often from different nationalities and cultures, close brackets, crammed into a small space is like a tinderbox, with the smallest thing turning into a full-blown argument. We have had police attend incidents. Most recently, a tenant threatened to have a resident killed, all because a request was made to turn down loud music. All this in front of residents' young families. All previous incidents are logged with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police. Why I've not moved? I can't. Like many others, as soon as people know there's an HMO next door, any buyers will walk away. This is the true impact these conversions have on the local community. They are taking the community out of community. Finally, there are 17 HMO conversions taking place between Powerscourt Road and the Burnham Grove, each with a minimum of 7 dwellings. So at the very least, there'll be an extra 119 rooms in the area, which is totally unsustainable. This will also be on top of the HMOs already being lived in. On the above grounds, we vehemently object to the application. Would ask if you could please take these points into consideration when similar applications come up for consideration, as they're all relevant to what is going on in this area. Yours sincerely, Mr. Roger Watling, on behalf of the residents of Beresford Road and Chichester Road. So that's his deputation, or him and his wife's deputation. For me, I think it's relevant to focus on a couple of points. Now, I appreciate the 2.8% is well below the 10% limit that we have, but the difficulty is you have a representative here from the business that's putting forward these applications. It's a business. You have the views here of residents. You have the views of ward councillors. I've been a councillor here since 1995, albeit with a 1 term off. I have seen numerous, this is not an exaggeration, I've seen numerous previous instances where either an owner or a company has come along and said to us, there'll be no problem with these HMOs, we're responsible operators. Now, I don't aim this at the current applicant, but what I'm saying as a matter of reality is that plenty of those incidents, or at least a number of those incidents, as a ward councillor, I've then been called in to deal with problems at HMOs, and I'm sure other councillors here will have had that experience as well. Residents don't complain without reason. They give valid reasons. I'm quite often shocked, actually. This is the second HMO planning I've attended, and I've got one again next month. This issue about parking, which is included as a valid reason to an area to look at, and obviously you've heard what the resident says. For the alleged expert within Portsmouth City Council to come up with that throwaway gesture, I totally disagree with what the transport officer has said in regards to this, that this will have no impact at all. It's a stupid thing to say. I've had lots of issues in Chichester Road and in other roads in that part of North End, as I'm sure you have, Chair, whereby people have told us the problems with parking. And for this to be almost dismissed out of hand is ridiculous. And I shall certainly look at ways in which Portsmouth City Council can seemingly give better attention to this area, because it never seems that parking is taken with any degree of seriousness, despite the real concerns that residents have and do face. So, Chair, I would hope this is rejected. The water pressure is another very relevant part that was brought. It was certainly used as an argument in a previous HMO that I attended to as well. It does. An additional 8 bathrooms, an additional 8 individual residents living in there. Clearly, if an area is already having problems, it will make the problems worse. One can only assume. I'm not an expert in that field, but I can only make that assumption. I hope you will reject this today. I hope you will take your own experiences across various wards in the city, why people object this particular planning application, contrary to what the applicant's proposer has said. I don't believe at all is suitable, and hardly the most suitable one that you could ever see in the area. Ridiculous. So please reject this, and I hope very much that residents will see an assurance that planning committee members accept the problems that they've got and do respond to them when they raise them. Thank you.
You got me twice there. I thought you were coming to a conclusion and then carried on, so I didn't want to...
I didn't get my beep, so I assume I was still within the 6 minutes.
Yeah, you are literally about 30 seconds over, something like that. All right. So, Ms. Newell, anything arising out of the deputations that you want to address?
Well, I can go through each point if you would like.
Well, just if anything's... yeah, go on.
Okay, well, the key points, I mean, to pick up one of the last ones about parking, the standards for a 3-bedroomed dwelling house is 1.5 parking spaces. It is 2 for a 8-bedroom HMO. So the expected or general level of parking associated with the 2 different properties is very similar. So on that reason alone, we wouldn't expect to withhold planning permission.
Just to be clear, it's 0.5 of a car.
Yeah.
Right.
So obviously different C3 dwelling houses will vary depending if there's one person or a family and what the level of car ownership is and where it is, etc. Just as an HMO will vary as well, but broadly speaking, the 2 demands are expected to be pretty similar, so hence no officer reason for refusal on that point. It's not to say there aren't parking pressures across the whole city and undoubtedly on this road from the existing situation, but a proposal shouldn't have much effect on that. With respect to water, pressure, use and sewage and so on, Councillor Fazackley was right. We looked at that in some detail at the previous application a couple of committees ago. Officer advice was clear at that time. The statutory undertaker has their responsibilities, their statutory responsibilities to deal with these problems, whether or not an HMO is approved today or not. For the existing situation, if there are problems with pressure and escapes of sewage and so on, that's something to work between Southern Water and the City Council as well, of course, as Highways Authority. Is there a difference between an 8-person HMO and a large family that could occupy this house with children and washing and so on? Arguably not. It's impossible to say that there definitely would be more problems. I think those were the 2 key points. Antisocial behaviour, again, you can get antisocial behaviour whether it's an HMO or any other sort of occupation as a dwelling. So again, we're unable to tar everyone with the same brush and say that all HMOs are going to result in antisocial behaviour. A lot of HMOs are occupied by perfectly respectable people, or all of them are, who are going about their business and living together and trying to be a part of the community. And indeed, that's part of the mix up to the sort of 10% that we indicate. Thank you, Chair.
All right, so there were questions also raised by deputations through Councillor Zackley and himself about conserving water, raw sewage spilling out across the junction, and incidents around crime in a previous one. We hear that sometimes. So anyway, those are things perhaps that the planning members are about to tease out. Members, any questions of the officer? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Lee. I just wanted to run through some of the other ones, Simon, that the objectors have raised, and then also look at what we can and can't, and then question what we can and can't do as a committee. So, one issue is the increase in fire risk, which is objection H on the list. Is that a valid planning reason for refusal?
Without reading the individual letter, I'm not sure exactly what they believe the fire risk is, but no, the fire risk is dealt with under the building regulations.
So that's not something this committee can consider legally. Is that correct?
In everyday run-of-the-mill issues about individual occupation of a building, correct, not for this committee.
Because we know from the surveys that we've carried out as a council that there are significantly more chances of what's called category 1 hazards, in other words, the real problems that occur within homes, within HMOs than elsewhere. The next one is overcrowding, too many rooms for the size of property. How many people live there currently? If you don't know, please say so.
No, I don't know. I don't know.
Honesty always works.
It's a 3-bedroom family house.
Okay, so that could be 5 or 6 people from my experience, but we'll tease that out later. Then we've got mixture of people from different countries and cultures lead to problems. Even if that may or may not be true, and Jason has outlined that local residents believe that to be true, is that a valid reason legally to refuse an application?
Not in my opinion.
Right, okay. My next issue is around what's happened before, 1.8. We've talked about prior approval and permitted development, but in 1.8, there's something from paragraph 1.8 of the report. There's an extension, 6-metre extension, where it says prior approval is not required. Is that the permitted development stuff that you were talking about earlier, Simon? Is that what's needed that's within permitted development, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, I like to characterise it as being halfway between permitted development and needing planning permission, in that they have to apply to have the council confirm, or otherwise, that consent will not be required for the development they propose because of its scale and position. So they do have to write to the council. It's not permitted development, nothing at all for the planning authority. They have to apply to confirm that the council won't call it in for a decision, and that depends on whether or not only one of the adjoining neighbours objects on the point of amenity within the requisite 21 days. So if there's no objection, the local planning authority is unable to refuse the application, even if it wanted to. It's only if there's a validly made objection within the correct period, then is the decision brought to the local planning authority. In this case, there was an objection, but not from an adjoining neighbour, so there was no valid objection made in the correct timescale, so prior approval was not required. It's granted.
Okay, my final question, Lee, if this is right, thanks for colleagues for bearing with me, is that members of this committee received a letter from the planning inspector, because we've turned down a great deal of HMOs across the piece, saying firstly committee members didn't know planning law, which was a bit impressive. And then secondly, saying that things that we have done to try and balance the sort of issues Jason and his residents have raised with planning law, things like restricting occupation to certain numbers, were also things that they didn't like if this were to go to appeal. In your professional judgment, Simon, if we were to restrict the numbers of people in this property to say 8, would that be overturned at the planning inspectorate? I'm happy for Juliet's guidance as well as the legal board.
An applicant can appeal against a refused decision or an approved decision's conditions So the applicant, if they don't like a condition imposed by the local planning authority, so in theory, the applicant could decide to, if this were granted with a condition saying no more than 8 people, the applicant could appeal against that decision, that condition. I rather doubt they would. It's what they've applied for. It's what they're expecting should they get permission. So I don't think it would be a terrible difficulty as per previous advice, notwithstanding some of the inspector's comments. I think this was a smaller, discrete, less important area about occupancy and a condition. So should the committee wish to impose that condition, as per previous officer advice, it's not necessary, it's in the development description, but should you wish to approve the application and attach that condition, I think you could.
Thank you for that, Simon. Those were my questions. Lee?
All right, we can have some more if you want. Anybody else would like to ask a question? No. All right then. So we are now into comment. Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to hear that the bicycle storage has been dealt with. One or two other things that we've been asking questions about in previous committees. Thank you for that. This application is clearly for an 8-bed, 8-person house in multiple occupation. We've sometimes put a condition on when there's been some doubt about whether or not a living room in the application would be subsequently applied for to increase numbers. That's not the case with this. I'd like to move it for approval subject to the conditions recommended by officers, please.
Okie doke. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you for that, Lee. Some of these comments apply to all three, so you will only get one go, luckily, on these things. The reason I mentioned the planning inspectorate's comments about this committee is that, in my view, that severely restricts the ability of this committee to try and deal with the difficulties that all 42 councils face when it comes to HMOs. We all know, deep down, despite what we may put on our leaflets, that actually HMOs is part of the city's housing mix. The nature of the city, the demographics of the city, the economy of the city means that this has to happen. We, in my other hat, with the housing hat on, have been trying to balance that up by licensing all HMOs and by having some of the most generous space standards in the country, which Simon has mentioned earlier on, and which many landlords hate, not least because they tell me they hate them. As they do hate licensing. They believe that will cut HMOs in the city. I have to say from this agenda, I don't believe a word of it, but it might do. So we're trying to balance these two things up. And what Jason was outlining earlier on from his residents are those issues. Some of those issues come from some of the flats that exist in the road. Some of them come from the houses that exist in the road, but we're trying to do that balance. And so the comments of the planning inspector, basically we didn't know what we were doing, were distinctly unimpressive. I have to say. So within the limited confines of that balance, I am proposing that we impose a further condition, which is that we restrict the number of people at the property to 8, and that I'm sure from the tenor of what Simon was saying earlier on, that's not going to be a problem, and as Mr. Turner has outlined, he probably is not going to get an appeal over it, because that's what he wants. To restrict that number as the only small way in which we can balance up the many issues that Jason has outlined and Mr. Watling has outlined from the local residents.
All right, thank you. To find some consensus, Councillor Smythe, would you be willing to subsume that condition into your proposition to approve the officer's report?
Very unwillingly, I would. This one clearly says 8 number, and there isn't room for another one anyway. We don't want double occupancy in here. I'm happy to subsume it, but I know that that is against the spirit of what the inspector has advised. Yes, but I'm happy. We've done it lots of times before.
Well, I'm most grateful for that, and it's not that the planning inspector thinks that we don't. Well, he says we don't know law. We just don't agree with them very often. We are a part of a process, a part of a democratic process that looks into these things, and sometimes comes up with a different view from officers and with each other. That is a part of the democracy of the United Kingdom, which I must say, I believe, is under huge pressure from the state. Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making some notes when the deputations were going on from both. Obviously, you know, as a committee, we have to consider all the evidence. And there, as you say, there are restrictions on what we can and can't do as a committee, but we're obliged to listen to the concerns there. And obviously, as a committee, to take those, you know, there's no point in us if we don't listen to what the concerns are. So thanks for Simon there for answering the points raised there. But some of the notes I was making myself as I was looking through the report and listening to the deputations there is one thing that struck me is that increase from 3 bedrooms to 8 bedrooms there. That does seem, well, there's going to be at least 5 extra people in there. So one of the things that got me is that'd be an increase in bins that would be used, increase in waste recycling, where is that extra storage going to be? Is the forecourt going to be able to accommodate all that? Because or is it going to spill over? I've had a look. I can't see anything that actually gives that an indication of where the storage will be, and that will obviously be a concern to residents. And the other thing on there is the parking thing. I'm looking at the report, and I know what the guidance is, that a 3-bedroom house has to have 1.5 car vehicle space. An 8-bedroom house has to have a 2 vehicle space. That just seems like that ratio doesn't work with me. But anyway, that's what the ruling is. But it did mention in the report there that no parking survey's been submitted to show if additional demand can be accommodated for that area there. By implication, that means a parking survey can be carried out. So I think those concerns are relevant, and I'd just like to know if we can have the parking survey carried out to see the effects that's going to happen in this area. I think the residents will thank us, and I think if it comes back and there is no problems, then the applicant should be happy with that as well. Thank you.
All right, well, those observations of yours are recorded in the minutes, and we'll have to see. I'll ask Mr. Maguire and the Chair of Planning and so on, see if we should have more formal traffic surveys in the area. I somehow doubt that the resources will be there to do it. I'd just like to comment on this extra parking space, 0.5, an increase in about 0.5. We have, on a number of occasions, rejected planning applications on about a half a car's width. You might not be able to do it, but we have. And certainly one up in Twyford Avenue, which is now for nurses, and they use the bikes, the electric bikes, to go backwards and forwards to the hospital. So the perceived worry has not occurred. But anyway, it was thrown out for that, and I remember it was Councillor Stubbs that supported me on that, and it went away, and inevitably, as has happened several times before, the planning inspector turned us over on that one. So, it is a bit of a wing and a prayer nowadays to try and chuck stuff out on 0.5 of a car's width. That's just the experience that I've had in the committee. So, but we have it now. Any more comments, anyone? So we have a proposition by Councillor Smythe with a condition that it's restricted to approve the officer's report, and it is restricted to 8 persons, and that's seconded by Councillor Sanders. All right? So be no further business on this. All those in favour of that proposition, please raise their hands. Councillor Sanders, thank you. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in favour. All of those against the proposition, that is 2, and all those abstaining, that is 1. So, Juliet.
Therefore, planning permission is granted.
All right, thank you for coming along, Councillor Fazakerley. So we're off on now to 281 Chichester Road. Over to you, sir, Simon. Sorry, not Sir Simon, Simon Newell.
Chair, could we ask the officer to linger over the plans? There were no floor plans in my report.
All right, Simon, we've got plans for the screen. Jolly good.
There's none in my papers.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Smythe, for pointing that out. We've got them up on the screen, I believe, in shortly. They are coming.
Thank you, Chairman. This next application is at 281 Chichester Road, which is at the eastern end of Chichester Road, for a change of use from a C3 dwelling house to either a continued use as C3 or Class C3 small HMO. That's a 10-year consent if granted for the owners to flexibly move between the C3 and C4 uses without the need for further planning permissions for that 10-year period. The application has come due to a call-in request from Councillor Weems with a concern about parking. There are 5 objections as well. As I said, we're towards the eastern end of Chichester Road this time, a mid-terrace again. That is the application property already with some works underway in the summer. A small forecourt, thinking of the waste point, the bins and so on, just a moment ago. A small forecourt to accommodate the bins. With respect to the first principal issue, the HMO data count, there's the application property in the middle with the red dot. There's one other HMO across to the southwest with the purple diamond shape. So including the proposed HMO, if approved, the percentage for the area will be 3.03%. So again, within this radius, with just 2 HMOs, that's 3% deemed to be well below, well, it is well below the 10% policy guidance for a balanced community. Existing floor plans. Traditional Victorian terraced arrangement with 2 rooms in the main body of the house and then the rear wing at the back there. So from front to back we have a lounge, a dining living room, a lounge, a dining living room, a utility room in the back there, a kitchen, and then the outbuildings, just small outbuildings, an outside toilet and a storage area. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, larger bedroom, secondary bedroom, third bedroom, and a bathroom. The proposal is to convert the property to accommodate up to 6 individuals as either a C3 or C4 dwelling with a single-storey rear extension and a rear stroke side extension. That's the single-storey extension there. A small extension on the side there, both permitted development, and then the roof, large roof rear extension, also permitted development. So in this instance, there was a front bedroom with an ensuite, a WC under the stairs, a tanks room, and then moving into a large and long kitchen dining area. The kitchen indicated in the middle and towards the rear, the French doors out, and a dining communal area here. And then upstairs, 3 more bedrooms, each with an ensuite. Sorry, these 2 share a bathroom at the back there. And then upstairs, 2 new bedrooms, each with an ensuite. Starting with the overall appearance and disposition of the rooms, there don't appear to be any difficult shapes or corners. And then with respect to the actual floor spaces, the bedrooms all just exceed the 10 square metres. They're all more or less bang on in your table on page 30. The communal kitchen dining area, though, is much larger than required. With each of the bedrooms at 10 square metres, that communal area should be 22.5 as a minimum. It's actually 31.28. So as you can see here, it's a good size for either a family dwelling house or up to 6 people living together as a small HMO. And then all the bathrooms and the shared bathroom also en suites match the standards. So officers are happy to recommend it for approval on that second main point. The parking is similar to before, with no discernible or no significant difference between existing and proposed expected levels of parking. Those are the principal issues that officers would bring to your attention. On the matters of waste and parking from the last application, perhaps if I can head off further questions or answer them. The Transportation Department regularly note that there is no traffic, not parking, no traffic survey, but to be clear, they don't expect there to be one for a small-scale development. They're simply noting that there isn't one, and so they're not making any comment. If there should have been one, and there wasn't, they would say so. But for smaller applications like this, there's no requirement or expectation for a traffic survey. Just wanted to be clear about that for you. And with respect to the bins, for an HMO like this, there'll be 2 bins, the waste, the general waste and the recycling, plus, depending where you are in the city, I'm not sure if it's citywide yet or not, for the food waste caddies. The bins would just be larger for an HMO. They're about 240 litres, I think, the 2 large bins for a dwelling house, for your everyday waste and for recycling, and I think they go up to 360 litres, so a slightly larger bin, but the same number of bins. So most forecourts to most of the properties in Portsmouth can accommodate those 2 bins and the smaller caddy. Thank you, Chairman.
Before we go to Mr. Hill, on the plans in the roof extension, where the loos are overlooking the front, the dotted lines, I guess they're head heights, all right? Could you just go through that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we noticed that. It looks like you might be sitting there in glory in the middle of the room. The toilets. The applicant's clarified that that's actually this is descending, the ceiling's descending down towards the front of the house into the roof space. So there would be a low wall against which the loo would be set, and then about sort of waist height, there would be a shelf coming down into the roof. So it's just making sensible use of that area to put things on the shelf. So it wouldn't be floating around on its own there.
Yeah, we can't have things floating, can we? Mr. Hill.
Thank you. So, a couple of points specific. Obviously, pretty much everything from the last deputation applies to this one. A couple of points specific to this one is obviously the comment from private sector housing, who are the experts about the design and layout of the property, from a council's perspective, said, based on the layouts and sizes provided, there are no adverse comments to be made by private sector housing. And they also mentioned it would be required to be licensed under Part 2 of the Housing Act 2004. As you've heard, all of the rooms are fully compliant with your space standards and with all of the legislation. A couple of points I wanted to make which probably relate to all applications. Number one, Portsmouth has some of the toughest regulations in terms of HMO sizes, in terms of licensing, of any locality in the country, but particularly locally. Why is that important? Because we often hear complaints about the sizes, or that we're close to the size and that side of things. Ultimately, as a city, we have an excess number of people for the amount of accommodation we have. We can't physically meet our housing targets in terms of providing new accommodation. HMOs is, in my opinion, one of the best ways of meeting that target because of the sheer number of additional dwellings we're able to add. But let's not forget, we're in a city of 258,000 people, according to the statistics I've just managed to find online. And right now, there are 4,322 HMOs. Many of them may be 3 beds, many of them 4 beds, because 3 beds still count as HMOs. But the point being is that 4,300 actually hasn't really changed this year. We're in October. So if you were able to access the statistics of how many HMOs there were in January, the objection that we had from the councillor earlier said, oh, there's 17 7-beds being added between Powers Court Road and Chichester Road. That may be the case. But how many landlords are there that are being forced to sell because of the increase in interest rates and the fact that it is no longer profitable for them to hold a property any longer? If you look at the statistics nationally, you'll find around 25% of landlords are selling. What does that mean? Does that mean that tenants are suddenly in a position to buy? Absolutely not. It means the costs have gone up massively for them. So what does it mean? Let's say that these applications are refused because we don't like HMOs. How else are we going to provide the accommodation? Because I know that by driving the standards of accommodation that you expect up, making them tougher than any other city locally, what will happen? Will those landlords still invest in Portsmouth, or will they invest in other locations? Will the desirable tenants that currently live in these properties be forced to live in other locations because of that? So I would urge you to look at a holistic picture as to accommodation, rather than looking at, oh, there's 17 HMOs being added. Yeah, there are. But look at the number of HMOs month on month that there are. Look at the fact that we have a growing population in Portsmouth. For the last 19 years, the city's population has increased in size. The working age population in Portsmouth is one of the highest in the country. The city is the second most densely populated city in the country, second only to Luton. So we have one of the highest demands for HMO rooms and one of the best opportunities to provide that accommodation.
Mr. Hill, I'm terribly sorry. Whereas I might agree with a lot of what you're saying, we've got to look at the planning merits of this particular
That's fine. This is
application.
I'm 3 minutes over.
Yeah, I know. So I'll give you a little longer, but we need to stick to the merits of this particular planning. Yeah, overall, we all understand the argument that you're making.
Cool. The point being is, I think it's easy to look negatively on applications when actually, as a council, you need to look positively. The idiosyncrasies of the fact that we have to come to planning for these 7 beds is the people that are investing significant hundreds of thousands of pounds into turning these properties into purpose-converted HMOs, which are designed with tenants in mind. We're taking over a significant number of the terrible HMOs and converting them, improving them, that side of things. I view it as a ladder. Every single time I put a new, brand spanking new, well-designed property on the top, if the number of tenants was the same, that will force one of the poorly designed properties to fall off the bottom rung of the ladder. That's my point. So in terms of the water storage, we have what's called a DAB tank, so it doesn't actually have any increase on the draw locally because we have a storage tank. So water is stored as about 400 litres of water stored in the property of cold water and about 500 litres of hot water. So just because 7 tenants having a shower at the same time, let's say that were the case, or 6 tenants or 8 tenants or however many it were, that doesn't actually mean that there's an instant draw on water and that somebody in another house is suddenly going to lose out. I'd also urge you, please come and visit one of our HMOs. Come and see the standard of accommodation that we offer, because I've offered that for the last 18 months and not one single person has come to any of our HMOs. Come and have a look at it. Come and see the standard of applications, because definitely if you're one of the people that's going to object to these, I find it really difficult you can object without actually seeing the property. Including
Hill,
this application.
what we'll do about that, just stop you there, because
I think a minute left.
You have a minute left. I'll give you the minute in a minute. But we'll make a note of that point in the minutes, if we may, that you're inviting the committee to attend one of your HMOs.
Yep.
Very happy to have that recorded into the minutes. You must then write now to the senior planning officer, not to individual councillors, and then we can do a visit But as long as it is arranged through the planning officers, I have no problem with that. But as an individual councillor, I wouldn't come to your any property like that because it shows favour. Carry on for one more minute.
Cool. So, including the application property, the proposal brings a percentage of HMOs up to 3.03%, so around 30% of the maximum, meaning we're still 70% below. A lot of the comments that we hear have in my opinion, a misconception that the tenants are going to be horrible people, there's going to be all of these antisocial behaviour issues. We've never had any of that. All of the bin storage is provided within the forecourt. We can actually fit 4 bins within the forecourt, and the bike storage will be provided behind the property. Bike storage provision drawing has already been submitted for this property, so we've already shown the council what we want, and as far as we are aware, they're happy with the bike storage provision that we've provided. Happy to have the number of tenants limited to the number of bedrooms in the properties, as we always are. Thank you very much, and I hope you look favourably on the application.
All right, Mr. Hill, thank you for your passionate and well-constructed comments. Members, questions? Councillor Smythe.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm a little bit confused in that Simon Hill has defended this application as if he was the applicant, but it says here that Applecore is the applicant. It isn't a material planning consideration.
I understand that,
but I am confused.
Yeah, it's all right. We had the conversation. Any other questions, Councillor Smythe?
No, I would like to see, and I hope it would be possible to see, to make this into a question, a limit on the numbers of people if it were to be an HMO. Obviously, you can't limit the numbers if it's to be a family in a dwelling, C3 dwelling house, because it's not mentioned on the application, but that'll come later on when we look at comments. But
all right, Mr. Newell, can the committee put on a condition that kind of varies between a C3 use and a C4, restricting it to just 6 people, or does it apply to the C3 as well?
we can't apply it to a C3, I'm sure.
It's the mechanism now.
We'd have to frame it correctly, obviously saying as and when it was used as a C4, small HMO, there should be no more than 6 individuals occupying it, which again is unnecessary because that's what a C4 is, limited to 6 people, but if the committee did want such a condition, it would be along those lines, I think.
And presumably the licensing would say no more than 6 in any event?
Yeah, they have strict controls as well on each and every HMO. Yes, so.
All right, we'll see how it turns out. Anyone else got a question?
Sort of question. It was very commendable about the quality of the building and everything else. It was just on the water storage, which is obviously avoiding the drawdown of water. Is that water then tested? I know that would come under licensing probably, but there's a big thing about Legionellosis on that.
Any comment?
Outside of planning, I don't know.
It's in the minutes. Councillor Smythe.
I didn't get an answer about who the application is being submitted by. Is it Simon, or whether it is an Applecore application? I know it's not relevant, but it's maybe a mistake in the application, which is why I asked the question.
I think he's acting as the agent, isn't he?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, there's a professional relationship between Mr. Hill and Applecore, and he regularly attends for these applications.
Indeed.
The applicants are Mr. West. Right. The architects is Applecore, and then we work for and on behalf of the Mr. West.
I've got that one worked out. Any more questions, Councillor Dent?
Just a couple. It was applied to the last one as well. Lack of party wall agreement. Is this a requirement? And also something was brought up in the last one where all the sewerage waste pipes inside the building were renewed, replaced and everything else. I think my concern is the fact that it's not what's being done inside the property, it's what is the main drainage, which is Victorian, whether that can cope, which I'm not 100% sure it can.
Mr. Newell, have you got a response to that?
The party wall agreement, any agreements necessary will be dealt with by the owner and/or there may be affiliated building regulations matters. That's outside of planning, Councillor Dent. And again, the water supply inside and out, again, is also outside of planning.
All right, members, there being no other questions that I can see, I'm going to move to comments. Anybody want to make a comment? Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Lee. And this has sort of become one of my housing decision-making meetings, frankly, when it comes to discussing the merits of what we as a Liberal Democrat administration, backed by all groups on the council, have been doing in terms of licensing HMOs and introducing space standards, which is completely right, because we want to make sure that we don't want people to live in pokey holes. Two things as far as the specifics of this are concerned. Again, Simon, this is a 3-bedroom residential property. It's normally 5 or 6 people would live in a 3-bedroom residential property. So at the moment there is no increase in this, and therefore I think a condition that restricts it to 6 people, when it's a HMO, is a very sensible thing, because it's no more than is there now, and so that will minimise the impact on the local area. A small, like Judith, I will do something that's not a strict planning consideration, just as a point to note. If any of the 42 of us, our counts, do decide to call in an application, please come. I was impressed to see Jason come earlier, and that changed things, I think, for several members of this committee. I see that Daniel and Benedict have called this in. It would be very useful to turn up. I know they do from time to time, and it's really great, it's really appreciated, but they really should do it all the time. Without going into the delights of the licensing regime, but this will get a license. It will be enforced from December 1. It will be backdated to September 1, as per previous court cases. I'm a bit more concerned about this one than I was about 85 Chichester Road. This is the end of the Chichester Road that is more tightly packed. There are many flats, and many people in the area confuse the impact of flats and confuse the impact of HMOs and mix the two up. That's not their fault, but in planning terms there is a difference. And it's more like the sort of roads I see in my ward, like St Pirons, for instance, where it all gets a bit tight. So I am mildly concerned about the future impact on future residents with regards to it being bang on our space standards in many cases, although Mr Turner's talked about the communal areas. So I'm less convinced about this one than I was about 85 Chichester Road, but I will be open to offers with regards to any further comments on this. I also realise if we were to refuse this, this would have no hope of getting through any appeal, and that sadly is the environment that we're forced to work with.
All right. Any other comments? We have no proposal at all at the moment. Councillor Smythe.
I'd like to agree with what Councillor Sanders just said. I was a bit nervous about the tightness of the rooms, but I think we should approve this application with a condition that if it is going to be an HMO at any stage during the 10 years, the occupancy is limited to 6 people. That's what I'd like to propose.
Can we create a form of words, Ms Newell, that reflects the thinking of Councillor Sanders and Councillor Smythe?
Yes, Chair.
All right, then. Any other comments? No. So I would just like to say, responding to you, Ms Deal, that there's no doubt there's been a shakedown in the quality and standards of HMOs in Portsmouth over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years especially. There is no question either that as a result of the stance that the City Council has taken across the board, that standards have definitely been driven up. There is no doubt at all either that you have been important in doing that too. So what we are seeing, as you indicated earlier, is smaller, less worthy HMOs where people get stuck in a hole are being closed. Larger, more spacious HMOs better configured, because we've made that point throughout this committee, so we see a lot of the space standards for communal areas now being understood. But unfortunately, we are also constrained by national law and regulations made in Parliament. So whenever we get bashed over the head by some colleagues for HMOs, we have to remember that we are restricted about what we can and can't do. And it can be a bit frustrating, but we are getting there gradually. All right then, so we have a proposition from Councillor Sanders and Councillor Smythe. Did you second? You made a proposition that we do it restricted to 6 people when it's a C4. Is anybody going to second Councillor Smythe's proposition? Councillor Vallely. Thank you, Vallely. All right, so there we have a proposition. There's no other proposition that I can see, so it's to move the officer's report with the condition attached made by Councillor Smythe. All those in favour, please show. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1 against. All those abstaining, and that's 1 abstaining.
Planning permission is granted.
All right, then swiftly on to 275 Laburnum Grove.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 275 Laburnum Grove, which is towards its eastern end. It runs east-west across the middle of the city. It's for the change of the use from a Class 3 dwelling house to a Class 3 dwelling house or Class C4 small HMO, that flexible use for a period of 10 years, where, if approved, the applicant doesn't have to apply again to change between those 2 uses. The application has come to committee because of 19 objections, and which includes an objection from Councillor Swan. There we have the site outlined in red, mid terrace, and again on the aerial photograph. There it is on an aerial photograph. And again, whoops, from the rear.
Hang on a minute, Councillor Sanders. Ms. Gill. Yeah, I know you can't leave right. If you leave now, you can't come back in. Is that all right? Is that right, Ms. Gill? Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Right, carry on, Simon.
Thank you. Here is the street scene, a slightly larger front garden there, and a typical Portsmouth two-storey mid-terrace dwelling house. With respect to the HMO data count, there's the application property in the middle. There are 2 confirmed HMOs to the northeast, 4 or 5 doors along, and then opposite to the southwest, diagonally across the way. This application would make a 3rd within the 50-metre radius, bringing a percentage up to 4.4%, therefore well below your policy threshold, therefore indicating no imbalance in the local community. Existing property is a 3-bedroomed traditional Victorian dwelling house with the main body of the house and then the rear wing. So at the front of the property we have the lounge. The kitchen actually is situated in the middle of the house here, with the window looking down the rear alleyway, the rear yard. There's a toilet out of the back, the boiler room, and then a rear dining room and conservatory. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms, largest one at the front, a middle bedroom and a rear bedroom. and a bathroom. The property would be extended under permitted development with a minor extension here, and then the replacement of the rear conservatory, and then the large rear dormer roof extension to provide 6 bedrooms in total. The front of the property, of course, the front door retained in the same place. The first bedroom at the front with its ensuite. There is then a downstairs shared WC. The main kitchen dining room is in the rear wing, and then there is a further living room here where the existing kitchen is, and with the minor extension. Upstairs, a front bedroom with ensuite, a middle bedroom with ensuite, and the rear bedroom with ensuite. And then in the roof, extended roof, 2 bedrooms, both with an ensuite. Again, looking at the general disposition of the rooms, they all appear a reasonable shape and general arrangement across the house. And then with respect of the actual sizes, the bedrooms come in at 10 square metres or up to 12 and 16 in 2 instances, so exceeding the minimum standard of 6.51. If all the bedrooms are 10 or larger, as the previous applications we've seen, then the required communal dining area can be 22.5 as a minimum. In this instance, you can see it looks just by eye as being a good size, and indeed it is 33.15 square metres, so it meets the policy on its own. And then additionally, there is a further living room next to it of 12.57 square metres. So as I say, the overall disposition, layout of each rooms and collectively and the sizes all comply with your policy. Then we do have a number of objections, 19, including from Councillor Swan, with a range of issues of concern about the loss of family housing, noise and disturbance, crime, antisocial behaviour, parking, infrastructure, numbers of HMOs, and so on. And hopefully these have been addressed, broadly speaking, in the report. So officers are able to recommend approval. Thank you.
So there's no deputations or call-ins, but this is by the sheer weight of numbers that it came to the committee. Is that correct? Okay. And as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Hill wanted to make a deputation on this item, which I've agreed to. Do you want to go ahead, Mr. Hill?
Thank you. So just the first comment, because obviously there's a question last time. The applicant in this case is a Mr. Walker. The application was submitted by Edward Kircher of In Collective Works, which is an architecture firm, and we have a business relationship with Mr. Walker where we're managing this whole process for him, and hence I'm doing the deputation. One of the other points asked previously was about party wall agreement. So for every single one of these properties where we're going to put any steels into the property or we're forming an extension, we do need a party wall agreement. We obtained the party wall agreement for 273 Laburnum in July, and we obtained the party wall agreement for 277 Laburnum on the 9th of August. So both the party wall agreements for this property have been achieved through a party wall surveyor, Malcolm Belcher at Vivid Surveyors. So the other thing I wanted to do is, I've got a comment here from the owner, Mr. Walker. He just wanted me to read out. So he said, "Dear committee members, I'd like to thank the council for hearing this application, and subject to its approval, I look forward to providing residents locally with a very high standard of accommodation. I've read every single comment on the planning portal and we've taken these on board in the design of the property. We've also instructed a specialist local HMO agency to manage the property, and we're working with them throughout the process to ensure the comfort of both the residents and also the neighbours. I note the point about waste, and we're actively working with Simon and his contractors to ensure that this point is well managed. So, as per the other deputations, pretty much everything I said stands. With regards to the DAB tank, you mentioned a question about Legionnaires, basically. So we have like, when it's inserted, we have like a jet with a chemical solution to clean it, basically put through the pipework, which, let's not forget, an awful lot of the pipework in these properties is really, really old. So number one, we replace every single bit of plumbing within the property, but then we have it cleaned with like a commercial cleaning fluid that then is tested to make sure that it's suitable for human consumption, that side of things. So that's done. So this property would bring the count up to 4%, which obviously is around 40% of the maximum allowed, so significantly less than the 10%. You can see from the photo, all of the rooms are a really, really good size in this property. The property is a huge property from the outside. It's a double bay with a forecourt that's probably 3 or 4 times the size of a normal forecourt. So in terms of the bin storage, there'll be absolutely no issue in putting all of the bins out the front. To be fair, if we wanted to put the bike storage out the front, it probably is something that would be possible because there's so much forecourt there. In terms of the waste, as I said, we've got a waste carrier's licence, so any rubbish that wasn't put in the bins or people moving in, etc., we would use our waste carrier's licence to remove that waste. As the planning officer's already said, all of the rooms are fully compliant with your standards, they're fully compliant with licensing, so in fact, we've never had a licence refused for any of our properties. Probably done over 100 different applications throughout my time, not necessarily properties that are all still in circulation or properties that I owned or anything like that, but well over 100 applications of HMOs I've been involved with, having owned a letting agency that specialised in HMOs previously. We've never personally, nor as a business, have we ever had any applications refused, which I think should give you a good indication of the fact that we comply with all of the licensing requirements as well as the planning requirements. Again, all of the works carried out on this property are carried out under permitted development. We select the property, so it isn't a case that we just buy a property and then we decide to turn it into an HMO. It's like we specifically select properties that we think would be ideal for conversion into HMOs based on the demand that comes from tenants, and ultimately people vote with their feet or with their residency, and that's why we have a really high level of occupancy, is because we're selecting the properties that tenants actively want to live in. There also seems to be, so one of the things I did want to go through is there seems to be a bit of confusion over, particularly in Mr. Swan's deputation, which is quite lengthy, although obviously shame he's not here, is about the residents. These people, it's not that we're bringing people into the city who otherwise wouldn't live in this city. These people would already live in the city, so we're not bringing additional people in for doctors and nurse appointments and that side of things. Yes, maybe they'd live 3 roads away or 5 roads away, or they'd be in less appropriate accommodation, but ultimately they would still be residents of the city. So a lot of the arguments against HMOs because of the increase of number of people in the city, they're already here. We're just providing better accommodation for them, taking the strain off of public services. And whether you believe the argument or not, because often we get told that we're taking away family houses, actually every single one of these that we do, which is well designed, well managed, gets rid of often a low standard HMO which doesn't have en suites, which is poorly laid out, poorly maintained, etc., but also it releases a significant number of 1-bed flats back into the market for couples for whom they'd be far more ideal than for single occupancy. Thank you very much for listening to my deputation, and I hope you look favourably upon it.
As ever, thank you very much for building our knowledge. Anything you want to say, Mr. Newell, before we move to members' questions?
Mr. Turner.
Turner, I don't know, I've been calling you Simon all the way through. Turner, sorry, Simon.
It's all right. No, that's fine for the moment, thank you.
All right. Councillor Smythe.
I've got two questions, Chair. Thank you very much. And they're both about the living room area. If we could get that plan up again, I'd be very grateful. The two questions are as follows. What's the nature of that oblique wall between the living room and the kitchen? It doesn't seem to be a width of wall that's used for anything else but on the plan, and I'm not sure what the nature of that wall would be. And second of all, I think I would be right in saying that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to make another bedroom out of that in the future, should that be an application. We do get some of those, because of the lack of window and light to the back of that room. That's the second sort of 2A question. And the third question is, has the conservatory at the bottom of that plan, at the very end of the house, that is proposed to be a dining room with a Velux window across the top, will that, when the property is finished, be full stud brickwork and a proper insulation to the roof? It's not going to be some sort of glass or some sort of fragile and very cold environment. So
all right, Mr. Turner, you've got the questions there. It looks like a stud wall to me. What comes back later, we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you. Okay, whoops. Just get that image back up. Thank you, James. The question about this living room, which is, I remind members, the extra room. It's not required, but it is nevertheless provided. The diagonal wall, I don't know the reason for it. I suppose it makes better use of getting to that window. If it was, yeah, I think it seems to be a happy compromise. It's a subjective view between the two rooms. There's no narrowness in either of them, really, until you get right close to the window. But anyway, the room is a good size and disposition. It has a window there looking down the side of the house, so it will get some light and have an outlook. And then lastly, the conservatory, the rear, yes, Councillor, this is shown to be rebuilt. So this would be one new extension to building standards, building regulations, insulation, etc.
There's certainly some big stills going into this one, that's for sure. Any other questions? Any comments? Well, someone's going to have to move it or not. Anybody want to move to reject this application? I'll move the officer's report, there being nobody else. Is anybody going to second the officer's report? Well, thank you very much, ladies. Councillor Smythe got there first of all. So there you are, members. We've had the... Go ahead, Councillor.
In view of the fact it might be possible to make the living room area into another bedroom, I wondered if we could have a condition limiting the number of residents to 6 on this one, because it would be 6. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I would like to propose that, if you would be okay, I think.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that, but I suspect that we might see this come back later on, reconfigured. But that's not what we're looking at today. Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. While previously, when every living room was, in the previous examples, we've seen a communal kitchen dining room that wouldn't be changed in any way, and all the other rooms as bedrooms. And so the advice has been, if you wish to impose a condition, well, okay, it's not necessary, but okay. Here, there was no reason to apply a condition, and my professional advice is members should not. This is a C4 property, if allowed, between C3 and C4. It's a maximum of 6 persons. They have 6 bedrooms existing, and you have your own standards that this meets. So I don't see any reason. They don't need the living room. So members couldn't say, in my opinion, we need the living room, and therefore we must protect it for that reason. I think it will cause problems further down the line. So my advice would be not to impose such a condition.
Right, we've got very clear, well-informed advice there, Councillor Smythe. So just to move the officer's report, taking into account what Mr Turner has said, all those in favour of the officer's report, please show their hands by raising them. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against, please raise their hands. And that was none. Those abstaining, please raise, that's 2. All right.
Planning permission's granted.
Welcome back, Councillor Sanders. As I indicated earlier, 7 has gone, been withdrawn. So we're now on to agenda item 8, which is what we've all been anticipating. Ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves again, because we might have forgotten your names, and I apologise about that.
That's okay. My name's Nikki. I work for Coastal Partners on the planner at Coastal Partners.
And I'm Laura Denham, and I work within the consenting team for the coastal scheme.
Within which team?
The coastal team.
Yeah. And what you doing then, Laura, did you say?
I work as part of the consenting team for the project. Within
Consenting team?
Yeah.
Was that seeking planning permissions and so on, or whatever? All right, okay.
Yes.
Mr Turner, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So we have the Cedar Fences application, which is to vary the previous consent, that is to make some changes to the design and so on. I'll take you through all the details in a moment. As a direct consequence of that, we have 3 further applications for listed building consent for the lampposts, the listed monuments and the Naval Memorial. But they are 4 different applications, and although the presentation may include bits of the listed buildings in the first one, we still need to stop and make decisions on each one of them independently. But we can look at the 4 individual presentations if possible. The applicant is here if there are any further technical questions that I'm unable to answer. And Councillor Mason, thank you for pointing out this is in St Jude ward, not in the stated St Thomas ward. So we have an application, the first one, 23/00896/VOC, that stands for variation of condition. This is to vary the condition of the original planning application, which was for the whole of the coastal defence works on the southern Solent side. Just some context setting for you and for anyone else watching. The area on the left-hand side shows the extent of this South Sea coastal defences, a number of kilometres stretching from Old Portsmouth and Long Curtain, all the way along past the castle and all the way along east to Eastney. And here is a photograph of this sub-area, which is mostly sub-frontage 3 and a bit of sub-frontage 4, which is in this area. So we're in front, essentially, of the Naval Memorial and either side of it. So from the northwest side, the circulation area near the pier and the ferry terminal stretching along southeast towards the aquarium here. This is the sub-frontage we're expecting to talk about, or are talking about today. So a bit of context and reminder of the need for the protection of the South Sea cedar fences. The impacts of climate change are becoming manifest, and here are some of the previous events in previous years showing some of the damage that we have all seen at this committee, or indeed in person down at the coast, from climate change causing rising sea levels and increased frequency and strength of storm events causing damage. And then this image that many would have seen before, this is the extent of flooding that could result without these sea defences, with as much as 4 metres depth of water, which is a frightening amount at the deepest locations in the worst case scenario. So there are some 8,000 properties at risk in the area, some 700 commercial properties, and risk to human life, of course. So everyone understands the need for the sea defences, and of course they are well in vigour already across the whole of Portsea Island, in particular on Southsea, completed at Longmoat very successfully, in my opinion, which I hope some members may have seen. Now, just for those not familiar, we always anticipated amendments to the sea defences. The way it works with the Environment Agency funding is that the first application for the whole seafront was achieved with a certain level of funding, and upon achieving that first planning consent, the second round of funding was made available for further matters, in particular further refined design of the sea defences. And obviously it's clearly very complex as to how you defend different parts of the seafront depending on the different characteristics, different choices of energy dissipation, solid barriers, shingle beaches, the height, the disposition, etc., etc. And so that's the first consent unlocked the second round of funding, which we're all expecting, and that leads to subfront by subfront these applications coming back to you with, where there are amendments, those amendments being sought for approval. So this is expected work to come back before this committee. Just a slightly more general detailed map of the overhead of the area, again, as I say, stretching from towards Clarence Pier and the ferry terminal down across southeast towards the castle, and that's the aquarium just there, the Royal Naval Memorial, and Southsea Common, of course. So we're sitting here in the conservation area, and the Common is a registered historic park. We have the Grade 1 listed structure of the Naval Memorial and 6 other monuments along here, and the listed lampposts, etc., that we'll come to in more detail. Here you will be familiar with the Shingle Beach on the western part of this frontage. That would be retained as Shingle Beach under the application proposed. Further east in front of the Naval Memorial and further east along here, it's a more varied and less attractive and hard environment. There's no shingles so much here. You've got sea walls, steep banks, and so on. It's quite unconsolidated and, as I say, not particularly attractive. This will remain as a hard environment with the large granite rocks imported as an alternative way of dissipating and dealing with the sea's energy as opposed to the shingle beaches, for obvious reasons, because it's already a hard environment here. The principal way of obviously keeping the sea back is raising the level of the beaches and the defences and the whole promenade, and that is what the original application achieved, about 1.5 metres higher than currently, broadly speaking, across the frontage. The 2019 application achieved that, and actually with the further modelling, one of the advantages of the amendments in front of you is that sea level, the level of the promenade can be reduced to about 3/4 of a metre higher than the existing. Now that's, although lower than the 2019 approval, that is still tested and proved to be meeting the required 1 to 200 flood event level, including accounting for climate change. So the sea defences are first and foremost performing that function, but also it is important to maintain the connectivity between the public and monuments and the townscape, between sea and land. And having that slightly lower level of promenade and defences is deemed to be a gain with respect to those matters and heritage. So that is one important change that I can highlight for you. A second one is movement. Compared to the 2019 application, we've got improvements, especially to do with bike lanes, that I can take you through in a moment. Just wanted to bring out those two highlights for you. So there's just quickly an image from 2019, the previous consent, which had, we're looking east here, past the memorial towards Southsea Castle, so the sea on the right-hand side. Currently, there was two-way traffic along the seafront. In 2019, that was approved to be turned into one-way, with a bike lane here sharing the road. only one way. So that is the improvement that we're getting this time, if approved, with a 2-lane bike lane, and I'll show you that separately. Here we have parallel parking and some of the monuments still sitting on the edge of the beach. Moving towards now the amendments, a lot of change, quite important changes are happening. We've got generally the decluttered environment of the promenade, which members can see at Long Curtain. Again, personally, I think very successful with the quality of materials and the simplicity. That's an important gain, and that approach will be maintained along here. You now have the continued one-way from east to west, so travelling from Southsea Castle towards the hovercraft and the Clarence Pier. We've returned to chevron parking as per existing, which keeps the levels of parking a bit higher than previously approved. And then here is a 2-way bike lane for the first time. There's no bike lane at all at the moment. In 2019, it was a 1-way only, and the other ones were sharing. So here we have a real gain of a 2-way bike lane that also has a better relationship to the parked cars than further east, where there's a fair deal of potential conflict with people getting out of their cars and stepping straight into the bike lane as they head straight across to the beach. So in my opinion, this is a much safer arrangement and a better arrangement for pedestrians and cyclists and people coming in their cars. Here you can see the Shingle Beach next to the rowing club and the beach cafe. That's a maintenance access ramp down and a disabled access onto the Shingle Beach just here. And you can see occasional benches and so on, but as I say, mostly decluttered. A general view of the Royal Naval War Memorial. I'll come to this in more detail with that listed building application, which is the last of this group of 4, and the implications of the levels and so on. But generally a decluttered environment here as well, and an improvement. This is Serpentine Square, which, if I just take you back, is this area. So at the moment, you may not even know it. It's a fairly disused, redundant, not terribly attractive area of irregular size and so on. This is an opportunity to improve that, and that area is being widened and improved and rebuilt like this, with improved space, the excellent materials, stone and so on I mentioned, and public furniture and seating towards the rear facing across to the common inland. The Crimean War Memorial remains in current situ, but achieves a better surrounding and setting. That's the back of that Serpentine Square looking northwest and out to sea. So more images again of Serpentine Square there and the improved, simplified, high quality environment. I may come back to this later, the levels with respect to the Royal Naval Memorial, that's the same thing. I shall come back to that, I think. More detailed technical plans that are, and we've got some details there of the parking. I mentioned that earlier. The main headline from that information is 20 extra parking spaces compared to the last consent. This application, of course, has been very carefully designed, apart from the engineering I've mentioned, but of course all the heritage matters with careful consultation, principally with the Conservation Officer, but also with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, for example, for the Naval Memorial, and all the other range of consultees, Historic England, of course, archaeology, other internal and external bodies. So we have no objections to this. We did have someone who registered yesterday to speak. I don't think Mr. Timoney, oh, he is here. So we may hear from Mr. Timoney in a moment. Thank you, sir. I'm just seeing if there's anything else. There's more to come on the 3 individual listed building applications, but perhaps I should stop so that we can, having gone through the main points, listen to the deputy and the applicant and take any comments and questions.
All right, that's a good idea. So we've got Mr. Timoney, then we've got the applicants, and then we're going to hear from Councillor Mason. All right, Mr. Timoney, over to you, sir.
Chairman, councillors, council staff, fellow citizens. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Am I speaking right now only about item 9?
Yeah, but if you want to talk about the other ones, you've got 6 minutes on each one. I mean,
yes.
I expect you'll want to come back later and talk to the other ones as well.
Thank you. Item 9, repositioning of lamp columns. If we are not to lose it...
Beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, Mr. Timber. We're on agenda item 8,
yes.
which is looking at the modals that are being, the changes in the approved planning consent that's been given already to those modules.
Yes. Councillor Hunt, if I could, item 8 is a big item. If I could leave that to the end and just deal with the short ones. 9, then
No, so
10.
we're going to get a presentation from the officers on item 9 and the lamp columns and subsequently. So do you want to hang on for that?
Yes, thank you.
Is that all right? And we'll get on then. Thank you very much, Mr. Timoney. We'll get on now to the applicants who are going to make their presentation.
Thank you, Chair. If it's better for members, we're also happy to wait till the end of the next 3 presentations, if that works better.
Well,
or
sure. No. So this is your opportunity to talk to the issues that have been gone over by the planning officer, and I would recommend to you that you make representations on that because we'll come to a vote on that presently.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So as Coastal Partners, we're very pleased to have this amended design for the next phase of the South Sea Coastal Scene come before members of the Planning Committee. This section is actually a very tricky section.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I've just been informed that the objector does actually want to speak on this item.
Right, Mr. Timoney, go ahead, sir.
Yes, on item 8.
Yes, sir.
Right, it's the more complex one. I attended originally all of the presentations all along the front in different parts of the city on the seafront, and primarily dealing with Section 3 from the fairground to the aquarium. And the focus, the total focus, was on views from the common. I listened and I looked at all the fellow citizens' views from the common and the height of the maximum height, whether it be the walk, what we walk on, or the road, or the wall, any subsequent wall. It's the highest point, therefore views from the common. A critical reason for the common attaining grade 2, because it's very difficult when it's spaces and not buildings, was the views from the common. Everything really is about the views from the common and the height at the highest point. So when I read, I'm very pleased and agree that the surface, the walkway, will be reduced this time. It was increased in 2019. It was going to be reduced this time. Of course, I happily agree with that. However, I want to focus on walls. Because it's not specific. If I read through the documents and everything else, they focus on the height of the walkway and the height of the traffic. But is there to be a wall, for example, between the fairground and the monument, or is it to be the see-through bars, or is it to be nothing, as in many of the views? Is there to be a wall between the monument and the Sea Life Centre? As there is now, it happens to be 47 inches at the moment. However, the road, as it's going to be in the future, has its highest point in the middle, and it goes down as it approaches the wall, and it goes down as it approaches the common. So I need to know if there's to be a wall and what height it is, because it seems that all of the focus has been on the height of the walkway and the road. And it's the highest point that will stop the views from the common. And this is where I feel we have to focus. So I need from the staff some inputs on this before I would make a proposal. over.
All right, thanks, Mr. Timoney. You might get some of your answers from the applicant and then from Councillor Mason and then from Mr. Turner. Do you want to go ahead, ladies? You've got 6 minutes between you.
Thank you, Chair. I can address that issue straight away. So views from a common was something we looked at very, very carefully as part of this. There's a lot of work in the LVIA, so visual impact assessment. To some extent, we can't really get away from certain heights, because if the walls or the flood defences aren't of a certain height, then they won't function and they won't provide that necessary standard of protection. What we have done is been able to reduce the height of, it's a bund basically, so along the seaward edge of the common, it's a bund that goes into a little wing wall just as it reaches the Naval Memorial, and then it's symmetrical on the other side. So the height, I believe, in the approved scheme was about 5.5 metres OD. We've now been able to reduce that to a little over 5 metres, so it has come down by around half a metre. So in terms of our sort of deputation, this is a very, very tricky section. One of the reasons that the gentleman raised, I think I've probably said that for all the sections, it's a very, very complex scheme, but this one really has a lot of constraints. So you've got the common on the landward side, obviously a listed common that we don't want to erode or can't erode anyway. On the seaward side, you've obviously got the sea. You've got a lot of listed structures, I think it's over 17, including the lamp columns, you've got the monuments, you've got obviously the huge Grade 1 Naval Memorial. So we've had to work really, really hard. The team's worked really hard, following a lot of pre-app discussions with internal and external consultees to really seek as many improvements to this design as possible, but without compromising that standard of protection, which has been obviously that is the function of this whole project. We've also done quite a lot of public engagement, but not just since 2019 or 2018. We've done various things this year, and the responses we've got have also been very positive on the whole. I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Turner's set out in his presentation, but really the key changes here are the level of the prom and the secondary defence is all coming down from those approved in the 2019 design. We are also pushing things out seaward a little, as much as they can go, and part of that is extending that rock revetment. So as it wraps around the castle, we're now proposing that it continues right up to the beach club. And really these changes have given us a little bit more space, but they've really allowed a greatly improved public realm. It's allowed us to propose a greatly improved highway layout and improvements to the setting of the individual listed structures, as well as the Naval Memorial itself. So in terms of the Naval Memorial, the relationship now between our currently proposed design is a lot more sympathetic. It now sits flush, whereas before the promenade was raised higher. So that really helps to preserve its prominence and its significance. The smaller monuments, again, got a little bit more space, so they can now sit centrally. I'm sure Mr. Turner will cover this in his next couple of presentations. So they've really got a prominent position within that promenade, where some of them at the moment are a bit tucked around corners and sort of hiding behind buildings. In terms of the layout, the highway layout now proposed, we feel really reflects the importance that Portsmouth places on sustainable travel. So we've got a segregated two-way cycleway and a buffer. That's a lot, the public, particularly the cycling public, that was a real key for them, is having that buffer between parked cars and cycleways. We've obviously had the westbound single carriageway already approved. We're putting in more bike racks and there's 2 bus stops. There is an increase of about 21 spaces in terms of parking spaces, and we've achieved this by sort of bringing back echelon parking that wasn't part of the 2019 proposal. So that's all we're going to really say. I think Mr. Turner's going to cover it. In terms of the wider scheme, I would just like to take this opportunity to update members on the progress. So around the castle, sub-frontage 4, that's planned for completion in around about April, May next year, 2024. The works at Sun Frontage 5 West, that's the pyramids to Speaker's Corner, are literally commencing at the moment. That section is planned for completion around about December 2024. This next phase, which we largely call Sub-Frontage 3, but it also includes a bit of Sub-Frontage 4 up to Blue Reef. The plan is to commence this early next year, early 2024, subject to getting all the necessary consents in place. So on that basis, if members are minded to approve today, you'll probably see us back here in a couple of months seeking approval for those details reserved by condition. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, Nikki, thank you very much. Laura, is there anything you want to add quickly? All right. Councillor Mason, Mr. Seafront himself.
Right, thank you very much. Be it said, I'm generally very impressed by what has been going on and by the revisions. I have, however, had a number of people in the St Jude ward contacting me over the past couple of 2-3 weeks with comments and concerns about this. And I think it is only fair to the committee that I should bring those concerns to you at this time. The first concern is with the granite rock revetments. There was a picture which was widely circulated which showed the complete absence of a beach, just rock revetment. I am aware that since that was put out, there has been a covering of shingle put on much of that for good reason. However, people are concerned that given the level of storms and the storminess which that particular frontage between the Blue Reef Aquarium and what I persist in calling Mozzarella Joe's, that area is so badly stormed that the shingle will be removed quite rapidly. And they are looking for an assurance that there will be regular recharge of that particular beach, as well as the beach further west towards Clarence Pier. So there is a concern there. The second concern is that it's come from a large number of residents, which is over the road, that the attention that whilst the road has been revised, that on echelon parking has put in, which has generally met with considerable approval, the residents, especially of roads such as Clarence Parade, are concerned with the effect of making that road one way and not reconsidering that. And I think it is fair to bring that because it is a widespread concern that Clarence Parade is already a very well-used road, late night by boy racers, other times by quite heavy vehicles, that they're worried about the increase of traffic which would come from the west to the east along that road when the esplanade is made a single way from east to west. And they are asking that that should be reconsidered. I bring that to you. The other concern which was raised with me is over monuments, and I will raise that, if I may, Chairman, when we come to look at monuments. But those are the concerns which people have expressed with me over the past few weeks, and I must say, conclude with the fact that I personally am quite impressed with the way in which the revisions of this scheme is being progressed, and indeed with the way in which the scheme as a whole is being progressed. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Turner, any comments on anything you've heard today so far?
Thank you. Well, on the question of levels and Mr. Timoney's questions, the applicants have answered that essentially. I think they've answered this question. I mean, just like to reiterate that the primary defence is the raising of the beach and the promenade. The secondary defence includes the small bund on the seaward side of the common, and the dimensions were read out by colleagues at about 0.5 metre. We'll get to the more details of that in the future presentation around the Royal Naval, but it's the gradients are very carefully smoothed and so on, and I think it will be not imperceptible to the eye, but I don't think people will even notice the discrete bund all the way along the edge, the southern edge of the common, which will provide just that secondary level of protection, but overall within the lower heights achieved compared to 2019. So it seems to be a very happy balance of achieving sea defence, which is the primary concern, yet also doing the best for heritage and views and character. With respect to the road, lastly from Councillor Mason, currently it's two-way. The 2019 approval secured one-way, travelling from east to west, so that has already been discussed and considered and approved. So amendments to that would be, or changes to that would be a serious difficulty for the implementation of the scheme, put bluntly. I wouldn't like to speculate upon what the changes could be in terms of people approaching and so on, but people will rapidly become to understand what the new road layout will be, which is you'll need to approach this section of the beach from the east, coming down from whichever way you're coming, either down Eastern Road and Milton Road, approaching from the east anyway. If you happen to come down the western side of the island, you'd have to do the detour along Clarence Parade, as mentioned, and then come down. The first point would be Avenue de Caen to the castle and turn west along this sub-frontage. Residents of the city will quickly learn that is the new arrangement, the approved arrangement, and visitors for the first time, of course, will be directed by their sat-nav, by local signs on the roads, etc. And then lastly, Councillor Mason asking about the shingle and storms and so on. As I said earlier on, the beach presently in this sub-frontage, the western element around the ferry terminal, the hovercraft terminal up to the pier is shingle. That would remain as shingle. It is a dynamic environment, of course, heavily dynamic environment, and if and when sufficient shingle is moved away from that area, it will be monitored by the Coastal Partnership, and if necessary replenished with new material to continue to provide that protection, to continue to have a beach that's accessible to the public, to get onto it without a huge drop. The stepped revetments deal with the rise and fall of the beach, so at its highest point the shingle beach would be flush with the road. You simply step onto the beach. As now, when there's been storms and it's come down below, there's the stepped revetment revealed, so you can still get onto the beach. But should it become, as I say, too low because of continued erosion, new material would be brought there to replenish the beach. As for the harder areas, further east along this frontage, in front of the Naval Memorial and further east to the aquarium, I don't think there is any shingle along there. So there's no need for replenishment along there. It is essentially the rock. The large rocks provide that area of coastal protection and energy dissipation without the need for smaller material. So I hope that answers that question.
Great stuff. Before I go, I've got one question. The bund, I mean, we've heard Mr. Timothy's concerns about a wall. We've heard from the applicant there's going to be a wing wall on the naval, a short wing wall on the Naval Memorial, stepping down to a bund which goes lower. So there's no wall as such, it is the bund that will be the highest point and it dips down in the middle. What is the bund constructed of, Mr. Turner? If the sea does come up and over and it hits the bund, which is the secondary, and then starts to go down onto the common, what is the bund made of? Is it just soil, or is it underneath it? Is it something that will stop it from eroding?
I don't know the actual substance.
All right, well, I'm going to ask the applicants that then. It's unusual, but I am.
Thank you. So the bund is basically compacted material, so compacted chalk with topsoil and grass on the top. So the secondary defence won't have to sort of sustain any wave action. It's purely there, so if any water does overtop the primary defence, it just holds it in place, so it doesn't have to stand up to wave pressure like the primary.
I get that then, but how is the grass going to survive when it's put on top of a soil and chalk? Well, it's dry enough along there as it is. So what is that going to look like?
It will look just like the common looks at the moment. So at the moment, you've got like a gradient going down from the promenade. So it's designed to look and act exactly like that. It just rises up a little bit higher nearer the road.
All right, well, we'll see. Members, questions, Councillor Smythe.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got some related questions that, to some extent, unsurprisingly, pick up from Councillor Mason's concerns. I've picked up some of these concerns. Generally, the people I talk to on the seafront, there, I go down quite a lot, are really happy with the overall progress of what's going on and have a good deal of trust about this, and that's, I think, is a great achievement. So, but there are some interesting technical questions that relate to some of the questions we've had before, which I would like to rehearse. One is people are concerned about speeding on that one-way road, and in the last application that we approved, there was an area of differentiated paving going past the Naval Memorial that looked like it would act as a sort of traffic calming measure. And I wondered if there were any comments about the loss of that.
Should we get him to answer that one before we?
More,
I bet you have. Of course you have. I'm glad you. I beg your pardon. I'm glad you have. I'm glad you have. But let's deal with them one by one. The road calming, very important, really important point, because the idiots scream up and down the seafront. Mr. Turner.
Yeah, I think the area of different patterns were on the promenade for pedestrians. The road, as far as I can see, previously was a tarmac road with one-way arrows on it to remind people which way you're going, and that would remain the same. I'm not aware at all of any traffic calming on that proposed road, so it would be one way. It would be a 20-mile-an-hour limit as it happens. I'm not aware of any traffic calming.
All right, Councillor Smythe, the next one. You may want to see if the committee want to do something about that, whether or not we have the power to do anything about insisting that some kind of traffic calming goes in there. I don't know. Councillor Smythe.
I think I do recall some plans that showed some differential paving. I don't think it was a formal traffic calming measure. And certainly the existence of the chevron parking does operate as a brake for calming, and I'm glad to hear it's going to have a 20-mile limit. That is reassuring. In terms of the bund, which I understand about and think would work, there is a terrific amount of concern of the level, what appears to be the level of the water table across the common. And I am a bit surprised not to see that some more soil, some more backfill going in there. The common, even this summer, we've had quite a lot of rain, has been a quagmire in some areas, been very, very wet indeed, and in the winter, and that deters dog walkers and everybody else from walking across for fear of slipping or damaging the grass further. Is there any proposal at all to put any more topsoil there to raise the general level? And is any of that wet because of the higher water table, or is all of it because of the lack of a barrier between the sea and the common?
Mr. Turner, if you could answer, if you have any answer.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, it's outside the application boundary, so we can take that away, Councillor, to the relevant parks, for example, department, and happily do that for you to raise those questions. I don't know. I have seen water on the common. We probably all have. I don't know if it's one alone of different things or a combination of water blown over from the sea in a storm, or the water table, or runoff not keeping up with drainage. I don't know, but Councillor Smythe, I'll certainly take that away and raise that with, I think I'd start with Parks and Leisure.
All right then, so the applicants were making a note, just for your information, and my experience with the common over 20, 25 years, it drains pretty quickly, and the real problem is it drains so dry. But anyway, your next question.
No, that's very helpful, and I think I would like to think that was, even though it's not on the same as the application, that was part of the Sea Defence regular newsletter to reassure people who do walk their dogs there and who've been slipping over in the winter and and finding it really quite a wet environment. You can, parts of the winter you walk across and you nearly need wellies. So that would be useful to have that in the sea defence communication. Thank you very much. I think the slightly lower levels are useful. It's interesting, when you are on the common, you can't actually see the sea, even now, and that won't be that much different. I think the way you're treating the naval memorials, and I very much like the new Serpentine Square, is it called? I think.
Good. I'm glad you're agreeing with it. I beg your pardon, Councillor. Have you got a question for the officers? Because we'll come to comment in a minute when you repeat all of that.
I've dealt with my questions.
Very good.
But that's... thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
It's good to see that we've got two-way cycle traffic now. But can I just ask, where has the additional bike lane come from? Where's it been bitten from, for want of a better word?
It's quite complex because there's as the applicants have mentioned, there's a certain amount of land available between the edge of the common that we can't erode into and the seaward side where you've got the sea in the way. It's been a rejigging of land availability. There's been a little more overall expansion of the total width from the edge of the beach to the edge of the common that's enabled a bit more of that space for a two-lane cycleway. So it's hard to describe it, but the general moving around and rejigging has enabled it. I don't think there's any resulting compression or tightness as a result. There's still a very spacious field to the promenade, and then you've got the separation between bikes, pedestrians and cars that seems quite a happy and a well-designed compromise now.
So it must have come from somewhere, though. So has it come from the beach, then, if it hasn't come from the...
As I say, I think it's probably been achieved mostly by the overall width of the prom being slightly widened, has then given a bit more space for a two-lane bikeway instead of just the one.
So it's been taken away from pedestrians?
No, I think the total width from the edge of the beach to the edge of the common has widened slightly. There's more space to play with.
So you've taken it from the beach then? Because you said you haven't taken it from the...
Yeah, you can say you've taken it from the beach.
You've moved it over, you've taken a little bit more over onto the beach. It's got a...
Yes.
My second point is it doesn't work very well, the cycle lane down at the easterly end of the beach, where you've got daily you get problems between pedestrians and people coming out of their cars, going across the bike lane and onto the promenade. It's a day that you sort of alluded to it, Councillor, earlier. So can I just ask, the path between the cars being parked and the cycle lane, is that raised? Can I just...
Thank you. The prom is all pretty level. So you've got demarcations in materials of surface to help differentiate between different... if we get the slide up again, I can talk to the slide at the same time and you can see it better. Thank you. So here we have the road heading towards us, heading east. Here's the chevron parking. Here's the pedestrian lane between the two. So that's the greatest separation you've got between the cars and the bike lane here than you have over at Eastney, Councillor, where you rightly remarked that it is a real conflict, a real problem if people aren't looking. So up at Eastney, you park your car at right angle, parallel to the sea, and you step straight into the cycle path. And if you're just thinking about getting onto the beach, you may not remember to look for someone approaching you. So here, you've got a greater distance and therefore a cone of visibility either side. You're going to notice much more easily cyclists coming in front of you as opposed to directly from your side. So you can see the difference in materials. That looks like a curb to me as well, which is a pretty sensible idea to help prevent cars bumping a bit too far.
So, sorry, just to clarify that point.
One moment, ladies, is that a curb? Yes, so it's different to Eastney, very different.
So that is a raised lane then between the two?
Yes, so you've got the parking and then you've got a curb up to the pedestrian buffer. So you step up.
And then you step down to get onto where the bikes go?
Yes, there's a curb.
So there's another road for the bike. So it'll just be a bit safer. That's all I think if they've got it.
Yeah, you've got your answer, which is a good point to make.
My third point was sort of following on from Councillor Smythe's point, which was around the one-way traffic. The pictures are all sort of down this end by the rowing club, and you can see a bit of a chicane by the Royal Naval Monument. There's a different coloration to the surface, not a different level in that surface. Can you talk us through that?
Thank you. Yes, thanks for pointing that out. General principle you'll see with the listed monuments as well, and I remember previous sub-frontages, where there is a heritage element, especially such an important one, there is a different treatment, a better quality treatment, A and B, to indicate and to give more significance to the setting of a heritage asset, in this case the Grade 1 listed memorial. So yeah, you can see the materials change in front of the memorial from a blacktop to stonework and so on. So yes.
Councillor Sanders, a question.
Yes, just a couple of questions, Lee. Firstly, there's been some discussion on social media I've seen around the future of what's described as the long blue shelter by the Briny, which I believe is going. It may not necessarily be a bad thing, but it would be interesting to know what is proposed to replace it. I understand from previous discussions the council said it will do something, but that something might be quite useful.
That's over in front of the rock gardens, isn't it, the Briny? So that's
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know, Councillor, that's outside of this application area.
It is, but when I saw it, the impression I got was being dismantled with a view to it being returned. Am I correct, ladies?
The latest information that I have, which hasn't changed, I'm afraid, since the last committee, is that that long shelter is being removed and a different new shelter that hasn't so far appeared on our planning applications is to be put back, partly kind of arranged by the council rather than just Coastal Partners, but I suspect it will be like a joint working, but I don't have any other updates since.
Right. Well, that's a 1950s shelter.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily a disenhancement
not for
of the
today,
area.
Councillor Sanders.
Sorry?
Not for today.
Okay,
All
fine.
right.
Well, that's an answer which is very helpful. Secondly, like everyone else, I think the two-way cycle lane is a very good thing. I am concerned that it may be inconsistent with the current sets of consultations from government around trying to avoid 20-mile-an-hour zones and things like that. What we don't want to do is to pass something today and then find it can't happen because the rules have changed. Is it the view that it's consistent with what is emerging from government, or is it just a case of you've got to see what actually emerges at the end of these consultations?
I hesitate to get into that area, but I will say I can't see any difficulty with the principle of a two-way bike lane separated. Of course, I think almost everyone must surely believe that's beneficial and safer for everyone. I won't get into speed limits.
I think that's probably a good thing. The third bit is just a general detail point, which is that the proposals for the gap between the parking and the two-way cycle lane are concrete from what I see. I know that we've looked at rain gardens and similar things in Halifax and Nova Scotia this week. Is that something that could be considered instead of concrete?
For exactly which part? Sorry, Councillor.
If you go back to the previous, sorry Simon, if you go back to the previous drawing, that one, it's the bottom left one. So what you're proposing is effectively is a pavement with lampposts in the middle as part of the delineation between the parking and the two-way cycle lane. Is there any chance for part of that to be used as rain gardens rather than concrete to improve the environmental aspects of it all?
I see, thank you. I think the short answer is that's not the intention, or indeed that's not the proposal. We talked about landscaping in this area. The approach here is it's a hard landscaped area with very little or no landscape in this particular area. I think that's probably to do with reasons of maintenance and so on, while of course there could be some gains in drainage. I think with the large common behind, back to the previous question, those would be perhaps relatively limited. I think for robustness and clarity and quality and longevity of stonework in particular, as well as any concrete, that's why it's a hard landscaped area.
Those are my questions, Lee.
Great stuff. So we're going to move on to comments. I'm going to start off by saying that I think that I've been around everybody, haven't I, on questions. So I think everyone's a winner with these changes. There's no question about it. There's significantly improved the public realm, and it's put to bed some of the rumours about the beach and what it might look like, particularly further up into the east with the rock revetment going out there, changing what is a pretty ugly area right now. There's been a huge improvement. The shingle stone, we've heard, is going to be recharged. My concern is, where does it go? I presume it'll be dragged up and brought back via some sort of shingle boat one day. So everyone's a winner, and I have to congratulate, I'm sure on behalf of all of us here, you may say your own things, but the team for what they're doing, all of you, and the council officers involved. This shows a really high level of listening to people and reassuring people, but at the same, and meeting what people want, but at the same time protecting the city, in this case, Southsea residents in particular, from the awful impact of a 1 in 200 flooding event is really important. The war memorial, we've seen the way that it's going to be engaged better with the seafront, creating this world-class destination along our seafront, and we'll talk about the memorial shortly. But the great respect that's been understood around the Naval War Memorial, I think it's going to improve that enormously and enable better commemoration there even into the future. So huge winners here. The issue on the speeding, that's really going to have to be addressed by the police, and maybe Councillor Mason will look to get in some traffic calming measures in due course, but the narrowing of the road is going to inevitably put off these fools who do what they do, and we hope the police clamp down on that, as they seem to be lately up towards Cosham anyway. So there's a lot of gain out of this, and Portsmouth is an enormous beneficiary of the hard work of so many people. So I mean, there's a lot more I could say, but I get the gist. So I'm very content and pleased and happy to move this report, this officer's report with its recommendations without any changes whatsoever. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Sanders. Members' comments, your own comments. We should go straight to the vote? Are you sure? Are you getting tired, I suppose?
Lee, the truth is, you've said it all.
Well, I have, but
mate,
I mean, you know, but
there may be some dissension along the way.
No, I don't think there will be. Everybody seemed to have got what they wanted out of this today, so it's tremendous, really. It doesn't happen all that often, does it? But, and I've said thank you to everybody. All right, all those members, I need to second Councillor Sanders. We're all done. We're all agreed. Everybody's hands up apart from, yep, all of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Juliet, all right, so it's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Planning permission is granted.
Tremendous. So, Mr. Timoney, sir, we're now moving on to item number 9, which is the listed building consent applications, which are our 3, and which Mr. Turner will introduce now.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so the first of the 3 resulting listed building applications inextricably linked with the wider cedar fences are the removal and repositioning of 9 Grade 2 listed lamp columns along the seafront. Again, these were approved in 2019, but this is an amended scheme, or that previous consent lapsed due to time passed. The existing lamp columns are distributed, 9 of them, across this sub-frontage, relatively even distribution. and there won't be much change either from the existing or from the 2019 consent. These plans are quite hard to read, I'm afraid. It's quite hard to pick out, but for example, there's the westernmost existing lamppost approved in 2019, I should say, and there it is in now proposed. So it's hard to pick them out. There's the second one, I think, the third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh, and so on. So the basic principle is that they're being spaced out sensibly across the seafront, as you would expect. We're taking the opportunity, the applicant's taking the opportunity of, with a rebuilt promenade, to site them on the seaward side, and the more modern lamp columns placed more on the landward side to light the road as much as anything. And let's show you some images. So here they are, typically spaced at 90 or so intervals, I think, with the more modern, slimmer poles on next to the road there. So a fairly decluttered environment. So not a huge change really from either the existing or the 2019 consent. Just a reminder what they look like. You may not be able to see it, but it's the Pompey crest there, and then a usual amount of elaboration on the columns. Again, as with all the heritage matters, carefully considered with all the relevant consultees and in particular the Conservation Officer. And you may have noticed the sort of condition you would expect that deals with a managed programme of taking them down, recording, dismantling them, repairing them, refurbishing them and reinstating them along with their new electrics, all carefully controlled to make sure there's no damage or alteration to the historic structures. So they will be reinstated at those various locations. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, Mr. Timoney, over to you.
Thank you. Are we to lose any lampposts between the fairground and the aquarium? The number we have now is going to be the number after the project? Thank you.
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you. I am concerned about or I want to bring it to the attention of all of us, about the positioning, the repositioning of the lampposts. At the moment we have this wonderful feature, welcomes people into the city by sea, of a string of coloured light bulbs between the lampposts. And if the repositioning, for example, one lamppost would go eastwards, another would be close where it used to be, but it would go westwards, then this equidistant string of light bulbs would be out. It would be a short section, there would be a long section. It just wouldn't look right. And also I would like to propose that a mention is made in the project that the coloured lights will be restrung onto the historic lampposts after the repositioning of the historic lampposts. So I want the historic lampposts equidistant, and I want the coloured light bulbs restrung. And then I have one additional item about this repositioning of lamp columns, is that you mention modern lampposts. Are there any at the moment? Is this a new addition? Are they the small ones that I could see you pointing to? And basically modern and our wonderful heritage lampposts, I don't think mix. And what is this? Is this an introduction that people voted for? Or? So, thank you.
All right, Mr. Timoney. Mr. Turner, have you got any answers to the questions? If you haven't, we'll go to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Timoney. The coloured light bulbs strung in between, yes, they're I think probably I'd agree they're attractive and interesting and very seasidey. I don't believe they're part of the planning application. I haven't seen details. The Seafront Partnership, perhaps the Coastal Partnership can just answer that in a moment for you. Otherwise, in terms of the gaps, you want to see regular gaps. That is indeed what is being proposed. The historic lampposts will be regularly spaced, which makes sense in terms of overall character and practicalities. And then lastly, you asked if they're about the modern lampposts. Well, there would have been a choice. Would we build extra lampposts to replicate the previous historic ones, or have brand new ones to light the road? Clearly a decision was taken to have a modern, sleek, discreet approach. And I think that's always a debate that goes on in heritage when you're copying something or building something in a conservation area with a listed building. Do you go for pastiche? Do you go for an appropriate modern approach? Clearly the decision here was for a modern approach that's been previously approved and accepted by all parties. I think, Mr. Timney, there'll be a discreet and sleek addition. The whole environment is new, of course, with new stone in particular predominating. So the whole environment will appear new and crisp and modern, albeit with careful nods and more than a nod to heritage assets. So the new lighting will serve to light the road more than anything. And then on the beach itself and the promenade, you've got the historic relocated lamps.
All right, Nikki, can you reassure us that the lights will be going back once they've been the new light all been rejigged?
So the current plan is that the festoon lighting isn't put back, and I don't know if members can cast their minds back to the application for 5 West. So we do have a lighting condition on the approvals that we have to get approved prior to every phase of construction. And so for that condition at 5 West, which also I believe has festoon, there was no festoon lighting. If it's something that members want us to take back and discuss between ourselves and Portsmouth, we can do that. And if Mr. Turner is in agreement, it's something that I would hope we could deal with via that lighting condition. We've got a condition where we have to set out all of the lighting details, the type of lighting, where it's going to go.
All right, I beg your pardon, I can't remember. Is the festoon light in this particular module, is there festoon lighting along there or not?
There is currently, as in at the moment today, yes, there is.
Well, we'll have to take this up in another place. All right. We take it up another way, Mr. Timney, the lighting. We can't do it by way of a condition here. Mr. Turner, Councillor Mason.
I recall from a different place about 18 months ago that the lighting festoon which we have is coming to the end of its useful life, and there was in Culture and Leisure a move to look to new forms of decorative lighting, replacing the bulbs with LED lights and coloured lights. How far that has gone, I do not know, but it is certainly under consideration, Chairman.
All right, well, it'll get teased out to everyone's satisfaction in the end, I've no doubt. Right, there we are. So that's number 1 concluded. Juliet, should we take a vote on each one as we go along or at the end?
Yes, you need to take a vote on each one. Just to note that Councillor Darren Sanders did leave the chamber before this item commenced.
Yes, he's gone off now. Councillor Smythe.
I have also heard and personally very much like the coloured festoon lighting. In fact, it's looked particularly good this year because I think some additional bulbs have been put in. I'm not. I don't think there'd be support for putting the festoon lighting all the way down the new seafront, but I think there is a role for it in both sections either side of the castle, and I hope we don't lose that completely. The other question I wanted to, well, I'll raise it at the end of this section because it's not completely irrelevant. But there's a hell of a lot of grief about the loss of the children's running track along this part of the seafront. everybody of my children's generation who I've seen recently remembers running twice as far as their parents by going along the track.
Oh, well.
And I think we will have some grief. And I do think we're losing the idea that sections of the... I mean, I think what's proposed is great, but we're losing the concept that we had at the beginning of this journey of having a differentiated treatment along the sea defence. We've seemed to have got into the idea it's got to be all, as Simon described, clean and crisp and modern. Yes, lovely, very nice, but there were certainly concepts at the beginning of this journey of each section being slightly different, and indeed the existence of some public art in some areas that I haven't seen yet on these applications.
Yeah, this part will look different to the old Portsmouth one that's just been completed. You proposing or...
Got a question.
A question, right, beg your pardon.
It was just on the going back to the bit about the posts on from Clarence Pier to the Royal Naval Memorial. There wasn't the original. There's 3, and I think on the new one it's 2. Is that just lux levels that you're just moving them for that reason? Because they just change balance, really. That's all.
So we're on the first one at the moment, John. And then we're going to vote on that one. Then we'll move on to the...
I'm talking about the lampposts.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I thought you were talking about... I beg your pardon. I thought you were talking about the...
On the original, you only put it up and there was a lot of detail on that plan, but you had 3 between, as I saw it, you had 3 lampposts up, Royal Naval Memorial to the Clarence Pier, and then you've now got 2 that side, and then they go the other side then of... so I guess I'm just asking, the question I've got is that just for lux levels, light levels?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I appreciate it's hard to see. Approved in 2019, there were 5 between the ferry terminal, hovercraft terminal and the Naval Memorial, and there are 5 again in very similar locations. So it's a minor adjustment. Clearly, they've had an eye to lux levels, both for the road and for the, in this case, for the prom. I can try and point them out to you again. I can go a bit larger. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's a slightly bigger gap in the middle there. But, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a slightly different disposition, but not radically different.
And Chair, just my second question was following on from Councillor Smythe. It was about the festoon lighting, really. I know it's not necessarily, but I would like that to be taken into consideration because we've spent money on, in East Indian Craneswood Award, our SIL money to put up the new festoon lighting. So if they're going to take it down, that would have been a waste of money, so we should have known about that.
I think that's the festoon lighting at the eastern end as opposed to this end. All right, so I think you're safe there.
I'm just taking into consideration, just if it could be taken back, thank you.
We don't want to set any hairs running that aren't there, all right? Okay, so there we are. I'm moving on page 75 under listed building consent applications. I'm moving item number 1, which is about the removal and repositioning of 9 number grade 2 listed lamp columns on the seafront. So I've moved the officer's report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lady. Thank you, Councillor. All those in approval, in agreement, please raise their hands. That's unanimous, Juliet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you, members.
Listed building consents granted.
All right. And so we move on to item number 2, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. application 23/00897/LBC. This is for the removal and repositioning of 5 Grade 2 listed monuments, including new plinths along the seafront at Clarence Esplanade. This is a plan of the existing. You've got the Trafalgar, and you've got a small grouping of 3, the Shakespeare and the Port or Shannon, 3 close together there. Trident in the middle. And I'm having real trouble reading this. Aboukir, of course, Aboukir, the 5, and the Crimean is not being removed, as we mentioned earlier on, but the environment around it is being improved. So those are the existing 5, so a group of 3 at this end and 2 more. Of course, irrespective of where they are along the seafront, they've got to be taken up and stored and put back in order to have the whole raising and the installation of the sea defences and the higher prom. And that, again, just like the lampposts, if approved, will be carefully controlled with a method statement to make absolutely sure there's no damage and any repairs takes place, etc., etc. I just want to get to the next slide. Oops, sorry. Let's see if I can get. No. There we are. Apologies. Here we are. Here are the 5 slides. Now, I mentioned the grouping at the moment at the western end of 3 of them. The opportunity has been taken to move all of these and to spread them out along the seafront, so to give a more regular experience for members of the public and settings to each individual one. You may struggle to see some of them here. Trafalgar is right next to the hovercraft. It's just to the right out of picture. So its setting is cramped by the less than beautiful appearance of the hovercraft, the perspex screen there. So it doesn't have a good setting. So moving it 8 metres east will improve that setting. The Chesapeake, excuse the pronunciation, again is moving 40 metres east. I'll show you the locations in a moment. It's really hard to see, this is so small actually, but that one is right on the edge of the prom. It's hard for you to see. We're looking from east to west towards the ferry, but it's sitting on the edge of the prom. So that one would come into the middle. All of them would sit within the middle of the prom, and so they would have their individual settings. So instead of them being looked at from one side only, perhaps, like this one, they would have their own settings and be much more appreciated and much better presented. And so in terms of heritage and overall character, a real gain. That's the general principle, and I applaud the applicant for taking those opportunities. Also, quite a lot of them being on the beach are also right in the front of what the wind and ocean throws at them, so they are susceptible to a bit more damage as well in their current locations. Peel and Shannon is there actually on the beach. That will move 45 metres east to get the setting, the spacing. Trident there, again, is actually on the beach with the prom just slightly behind. Now, that would go and sit in the middle. And Aboukir is on one of the man-made slopes down, again, where the waves are strongest, as Councillor Mason was talking about earlier. That's the hard engineered part of the beach that will be replaced with hard engineering with the rocks. Again, so they're all moving east by a variation of 8 metres up to 80 metres, the Crimean staying where it is. So Trafalgar, just the 8 metres to give it a little bit better setting. Shakespeare moving a bit further, etc., etc. So moving along to greater distances. So we'll end up with a happier distribution of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not exactly regular spacing, some irregularity, but a much better setting for them. this slide talks about those arrangements, the visual connections and so on. But here are the slides that really tell the story. So there's Trafalgar, moved away from the hovercraft and sat in the middle of the prom, so it can be enjoyed and appreciated in that manner, as per the Chesapeake in the same way, taken away from the beach edge, as they all are, Peel, Stroke, Shannon, Trident, Aboukir and Crimean, not moving, but with redesigned environment around it. So really that's the long and short of it. It's a good opportunity to improve their settings as part of the wider Sea Defence's works.
Members, any questions? I beg your pardon, sorry, Councillor Mason, did you want to come in on this one?
Hold on, Chair, we've got Mr. Timoney.
Sorry, Mr. Timoney, I didn't realise you were going to be speaking. Go ahead, Mr. Timoney.
Thank you. Do we remember the suggestion that the Yomper over at the long-term Royal Marine Barracks would be moved to the dockyard? Well, what we have here, my view is it absolutely should not, because it's the only one there to remind us of the great heritage that's there. But we have a great opportunity here. Young people are not as keen on all of these monuments that show past bravery. And however, the case with the Yomper was that the dockyard is trying to attract more and more visitors, and it wants to show them our heritage. And we have a great opportunity of moving one of these 6 monuments, 5 that are going to move, plus Crimea that's not going to move one of these monuments into the dockyard. There are lots of spaces there to bring interest to people. 6 is too many in a short space between the hovercraft and the aquarium. And please let's try to look for an improvement today. What I propose is that perhaps there is in the project, there is an item that our heritage, our one and only heritage shelter here, is to be taken away and to be given to the Canoe Lake area, which already has one. I think it's W02 and W05 are the figures. The Canoe Lake area already has a heritage shelter. We have this space from the hovercraft to the aquarium. We only have one, and the proposal is to be taken away with the view of lessening street furniture. And I propose that if the Chesapeake is the one that's closest to the shelter, if the Chesapeake moves to the dockyard, if that's the one that's chosen, the removal of it and then the moving to dockyard, it won't cost extra money. And that will, and then the others could be spaced out. I agree with that concept. But 6 is too many. And the dockyard needs something else. And we need the shelter. We have a baby granddaughter. My wife can feed a bottle to this moving child while walking. I can't. I have to sit down. Old people have to sit down. We have given parking there, and people will want to get out, get some fresh air. We have one shelter. Lots of people need to sit down, as we know. People have difficulty with walking. And please keep our shelter. Proposal 1. Please select one of the monuments to go to the dockyard and enrich our dockyard experience. Proposal 2. And please let's make an improvements today. And this idea of putting these monuments right in the middle of the walkway for joggers and for blind people and for people with pushchairs that are their attention's taken with the other children running away and right, they're fine being at the side. They are fine being at the side. They've been there a long time. We don't need more attention to war memorials. We don't need people to walk into them, or accidents, or future accidents, or claims against our council. They are fine where they are. Or if they're not to be, at least move them closer to where they are at present, and not right in the middle of the promenade. And well, regarding of the monuments, this is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timoney. Go to the applicants then, and Councillor Mason, if he wants to say anything.
Yes, the only question which has been raised by, well, two questions raised by residents. One was the wisdom of moving the Abu Qir Memorial. Are you moving it too far east, and why was it moved that far eastwards? And secondly, there has been a concern about making absolutely sure that there are no monuments which are obscuring the view from the sea of the big naval memorial. I think that from what I can see there isn't, but I'd like confirmation of that.
Well, we'll go to the applicants now. They make a deputation if they like. Got 6 minutes, ladies.
I'll just come back briefly, Chairman, on a couple of those points. So there are 2 shelters proposed. In this section, there's a yellow shelter that's already present, which will be obviously relocated and put back in a similar position to where it is now. One of the unlisted shelters that members may remember from Subfrontage 5 West, when that goes back, that is being proposed back on this section. So you've got 2 yellow shelters that sort of frame the Naval Memorial either side. We can't really comment on putting the monuments elsewhere, because obviously our remit is for Portsmouth Council, and we, as far as I know, we don't own any of the land at the dockyard, so I think that's something that I can't really comment on today. We have definitely looked at the placing of the monuments, and it's been very deliberate to put them in the middle of the promenade to really highlight their prominence, but we have the team obviously look at access and safety of pedestrians as well, so that's all being considered.
Yes, you're right. This is an application by the City Council. So, Mr. Turner, any comments or answers to things that have been raised?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, with the request for an alternative arrangement, i.e. one of the monuments being placed into the dockyard, we get this sometimes with planning applications asking for something else, but of course what is in front of the local planning authority is 5 monuments to be relocated here. It's not a question of whether or not it goes somewhere else. So is there an objection to the relocation of these 5 monuments? We can't answer the question in this application, should one of them go elsewhere. That's outside this discussion today. So all the relevant discussions have taken place with historical and with the conservation officer, etc. And there seems to be general agreement and satisfaction with the relocation of the 5, keeping all 5 on the seafront and relocating them to have a more even distribution and placing them, contrary to Mr. Timoney's view, in the middle of the promenade. There's no consultation reply that I've seen, including from transportation or anyone else, saying that there's a restriction in terms of space for people to get by. It strikes me from the images we've seen that there's still a good availability of circulation space for people around the promenade, around the monuments, separated from the bikes and the cars. So it wouldn't appear to be any danger of compaction or congestion. The applicant has answered the questions about the shelters, thank you. And then Councillor Mason has asked about Abu Qir Memorial and what's in front of the Naval Memorial. Abu Qir is currently in front of the Naval Memorial, and it would be moved 80 metres to the southeast to take it away from the front of the memorial. We can see the image if it comes up. So that would open up. I don't think it was a terrible imposition or obstruction in front of the Naval Memorial, but one could argue that placing it to one side could be advantageous I'm just looking at Street View now. It's a modest monument as well, actually, I should say. So, in any event, the proposition is to remove it further away to widen the aspect and prominence of the Grade 1 structure.
Members, any questions, Councillor Smythe?
This is a question I can see what this planning application is about, and I can see that it's not about things that it's not about. But does the plan at the moment show seating generally in the positions it's going to be in? Could we have a quick look at where that seating is going to be and where there's enough? I think one of the impressive things about the step 1 that we've already done is that there's plenty of seating. And I'm worried about the fact there may not be plenty of seating in this section, although I appreciate it's not strictly part of the planning application. But do we get a chance to look at
All
the
right.
seating?
No, okay.
Another
We'll
time?
give it that. Throw the net more widely, Simon. The seating.
I mean, we either have a chance to look at it,
Yes,
or we're
yeah.
passing this by default without enough seating.
Well, that was the previous planning application, but there we go.
Yeah, if we can get the image again, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I did mean to mention it. Here are some of the seating. It may not look like a traditional seat with a back, but that's clearly one of those sorts of structures where you can sit on either side of it, around it. It's that big. There's another one. So along with the shelters just mentioned and the occasional placing of seating arrangements, that seems to be taken care of, broadly speaking.
Thank you. It was confusing.
I got the wrong end of the stick, I'm sorry.
It was confusing to think that this application, without having pointed those out, was I realised that it was in the previous one. So is there anything else we should notice here that isn't?
There'll be the odd rubbish bin and so on, but not too much clutter.
I'm most grateful. Sorry I got hold of the wrong end of the stick. Members, there's no other questions I can see. I mean, it's very clear to me that these planning application, the removal and repositioning of the Grade 2 listed monuments, etc., is going to improve the character and enhance the importance of the monuments, put into places that are more respectful of the things that have happened in the past. So I would like to move the recommendation, which the officers are asking for approval. We're referring to number 2 on page 75, which is removal and repositioning of 5 Grade 2 listed monuments to include new plinths along the seafront at Clarence Esplanade. So members, all those in agreement, please show your hand. I propose, I need a seconder, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we need a seconder.
Need a seconder. We're all, Councillor Dent, well done, sir. All those in agreement, raise your hands. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's unanimous. Members, thank you very much indeed. Then on to the last item, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. Application 23/00898 LBC works to the Grade 1 listed Portsmouth Naval War Memorial to include raising of existing planters and seating to the south, provision of new level access from the new raised promenade, installation of recessed floodboard fixing channels and associated regrading of Southsea Common. So some of those I've touched on already, but I'll take members through the rest of it. So the most important, perhaps, monument on the seafront is the Grade 1 listed originally for the First War and then enlarged at the rear on the landward side for the Second War, a key feature on the seafront. There you can see it in its splendour and some of the close-ups of the existing setup, which is 4 steps up onto the platform. And that is the important point with the changing of levels. So with the 2019 application, which was higher levels, finished levels, the promenade was coming up and above the height of the platform, which was problematic in heritage and character terms for this really important structure. As I've said before, very happily with the second round of engineering and ability to revisit and refine Now, at this stage, the promenade would raise up to the height of the platform. So the plinth effectively would be lost, but it would be no higher than the main platform. So compared to the previous consent, that is again, whilst still achieving the primary function of the sea defences, which is defend the city and the inhabitants. So you can imagine this raised up to the height of the platform, to the memorial. So the proposals are that the planters and the low walls existing here would similarly be taken off, and as the land is raised, and placed on a higher level atop. And then the bund on the common would grade into that. So if I can try and show you that, that's a bit complicated. Here's the overall view, so this is all flush at the same level, and then the planters would be raised up, and the wall tapering down into the bund. So all very imperceptible, if you like, and gentle, but that is still a secondary minor protection. More of the same sort of images. I'll go back to the existing photographs to talk about the other elements. So these would effectively be a gap. As the planters and walls are raised up, should the water ever come up and lap around the monument, the gap between them and the main gap in front would become, it's like a gate. And so that's the location for the floodboard fixings to go in. So in the rare event of the most extreme storms and or high tides, just like in Old Portsmouth and other parts of the city, when the city council knows these events are coming up, members of staff are out and placing the floodboards into their various locations. And so here you would have a floodboard across the front of the monument, protecting there and the two smaller gaps there and there. It's about a 90 centimetre tall board, probably made of aluminium, but that will be stored off-site for 99% of the time, whatever it is in between storm events, so you wouldn't see it. All that you would see would be a discrete vertical channel on either side of each aperture where the boards would slide in with the rubber sealant, the seal in situ. And because of the width of the 20 or so metres across the front, there would be a central post that would be placed as and when needed. But when not needed, there would be a discrete plate, a metal plate set into the level of the stonework, so no one's tripping over it or falling into a hole. So it would be very discreet, those arrangements, but that is necessary just to provide that last bit of protection in the event of the most extreme events. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission has been engaged, as set out in the first report, for the various condition and positive engagement there, so no objections from all the heritage parties to the application. So broadly speaking, it's a good news story from the point of view that the higher previously approved level has come back down again, so the prominence and the height and position of the monument is best preserved, happily preserved, with the minimal amount of intervention possible whilst achieving the flood protection. Thank you.
Mr. Timoney, are you wanting to have a go on this one, as it were, sir?
Yes, I do.
Off you go then. Thank you very much.
I live in Clarence Parade, looking to the War Memorial. All of our visitors over 35 years have admired it very much. It's my experience, I use this part of our city a lot, it's my experience that people do not want to go and sit, apart from the 11th day in the 11th month, people do not want to go and sit around this War Memorial or any others, even though they admire them, and sit around inside a war memorial. And so more seating and all of that I can't understand. Where my focus and objection is that this levelling, and it seems that some of the road has been taken or is going to be taken out of what could be our future option to revert back to two-way traffic, because if traffic is moving in the front, for example, the coastal bus goes eastwards, it travels. If traffic is moving in the front at 20 miles an hour, then having two lanes would be fine. With regards to parking, one lane could be where this echelon parking is, and one lane could be the existing lane that's proposed. But what I want to say today is that we should keep this option open. Now, as far as parking goes, I think the MOT should be thanked for giving their sports facility over to the project for all these years to house materials. And afterwards, I think for flexibility, especially in the summertime, where rugby is not played in the summertime because the hard ground can break bones, that the MOD playing field, this particular one just behind the amusement park, could be used each summer for 3 months by the council for parking, because it would bring more people to the city, to South Sea, to the amusement park, to every aspect. It would enrich the experience for everyone, and it would give lots more parking. And then this small amount of echelon parking could be a lane going the other way. But I don't want the road changes around the war memorial to interfere with that future option. The option should be there for flexibility for the council and times going forward. The option should be there to revert to two-way traffic, going slowly and enjoying the seafront, and giving up the echelon parking for the second lane, because the parking will be in the MOD playing field. And that's my objection about how things are being proposed with the road and not the monument as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timoney. Councillor Mason, did you want to have any?
No comment
Very
on this
good.
one.
Mr. Turner, it's a City Council application. Over to you for.
Sorry, sir, but did Nicola want to speak? No.
No, they're not the applicants on this, are they? We are.
Yes, so we are the applicants.
Oh, I beg your
partners,
pardon.
But I've got
Oh
nothing
yeah,
to add.
sorry. Yeah, to the end of the meeting. I beg your pardon.
I'll leave it for Mr. Turner to.
All right,
to
much
respond.
obliged, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestions, Mr. Timoney. Again, it's like the removal of one of the monuments. You can make suggestions, but we've got to determine what's in front of us. So it's either approve or refuse. If we could have the image up again, please, James. Mr. Timoney mentioned moving the chevron parking. That has happened already. You can see just up here, there's the echelon parking, sorry. But once that's stopped, that enables the slight deflection of the road, which enables greater space in front of the memorial. So we've got the setting and presence and character of the memorial emphasised by the stone extending A, greater depth than currently with the existing pavement, and B, across the road as well. So you actually end up, in my opinion, with a more suitable setting for this Grade 1 structure than the current position, which, as you can see, that's not a particularly wide pavement, but that's all you've got, one pavement. So the clutter of the parking is no longer there, and the setting is improved as well, apart from the more space, less clutter with the natural stone materials used. So I hear what Mr. Timoney is saying about retaining potential options. There is a limited amount of space available between the back of the common and the sea. So we've got a final design here as approved in 2019 for one-way traffic, and that's maintained with important improvements for the listed structure.
Right, members. Councillor Smythe.
Reaching back to my previous question, and if you could go back to that slide, please, Simon. The road is in fact on a different surface in front of the monument. You can see a car heading off westward, which will, I think, act as a slowing down mechanism. So what I had thought before when we were previously discussing this is correct. That will, I think, slow traffic quite a bit because they'll be driving across there. And I think this drawing is slightly misleading in that it's got sort of people wandering around in the carriageway. But am I right in that?
Simon's going to answer, but it looks like it to me too. What it's doing is it's making the road more, it's mixing the road and the pedestrian together, so it's going to slow stuff down.
Indeed, thank you. I'm sure you're right, Councillor. Even if the surface is smooth or doesn't have any, it may have a slight rumble effect. But even just visually, that can be the effect of a different surface. You're right, yeah. And I think that person's just standing on the edge of the pavement next to the road.
And is the surface going to remain clean with cars rumbling across it? I mean, I like this. I think it's good, but.
I suspect there'll be a slight rumble effect if it's stone slabs, the junction of each stone one, depending exactly how it's grouted and so on. But I suspect there might be a little bit of vibration compared to smooth tarmac.
I'm not so worried about vibration as sort of tyre tracks running across, just black marks all over it.
Well, whilst he's thinking about that, we'll go to Councillor Smith.
Just a quick question, Simon. Regarding the outlying buildings to the left and the right, the buildings of reflection or whatever you want to call them, can you just expand on those a little bit? Because in the drawing, they're just shown as white boxes at either end now. Are they raising up? How are they being addressed?
Thank you, Councillor. No, they're not affected. The regrading around the planters and the walls at the front doesn't extend, so there's no change to these walls and the structures there.
All right, if I'm looking at this, and my site isn't as brilliant as it used to be, but it looks like, to me, it looks like granite. It's going to be granite, road surface is granite in front, and they're nodding their heads. So we are going to have a slowing mechanism and increasing the connectivity between the prom and this very important listed monument. So it's granite, Mr. Turner. Right, okay then, so we've had questions, comments. I think that this is really important. I think it treats this memorial with a huge amount of respect, and I'm enormously grateful for that. It improves the character and the setting of the memorial. So I'd like, if I may, to move the recommendations in the officer's report that works at the grade 1 listed Portsmouth Naval War Memorial to include raising of existing planters. The engineering solution is brilliant. Seating to the south of the memorial, provision of new level access from the new raised promenade, installation of recessed floodboard, fixing channels and associated regrading of Southsea Common. So I've moved that. I need a seconder. Councillor Dent got there just ahead of everyone else. So all those in agreement, can you please show? That's unanimous again. I think it's 7, Juliet.
Listed building consents granted.
Yes. Before we conclude, can I just thank the officers and the Coastal Partnership for their huge grasp of detail, which has been reflected in the answers and the commenting today. And it's a tremendous effort by everybody. So thank you very much indeed for what you're doing. Thank you.
Here, Chair.
Cheers. That concludes the meeting, I think, Juliet. Is that correct?
Yes, it was 6 in the vote there, sir.
Ah, very Very good. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you're right. And my mate behind me, the rabbit, Harvey, he sat there. He put his hand up as well. Did you not see it, Julia?